Inside the ruins of Reifenheim, the capital of the Antares Empire, demonic monsters are ravaging the entire kingdom. And although the soldiers are like ants against these creatures, they are still fighting off the terrifying otherworldly beings. 2 million soldiers and thousands of magicians died, with many more still injured. But humanity still has one last hope to fight off the evil Demon King, and everyone is confident that he will be defeated by the true hero. The scene then cuts to the heart of the great demonic palace, known as Garak Hall of Abyss, where humanity's supposed hero, known as Alex von Hallane, faces the Demon King, who's just chilling on his throne. As for this demon guy, he is Reifenhard, the emperor of the Antares Empire, who seems quite annoyed after hearing all the righteous bullshit from these so-called heroes. One of the heroes among the party, known as the Sword Saint Cyrus, gets all fired up. With his sword crackling with intense energy, he vows to eliminate the Demon King and put an end to the Dark Empire's history. The already annoyed guy gets even more irritated when Cyrus calls his Antares kingdom a Dark Empire. Then there is this muscle-bound warrior, known as the Martial King Tessalon. This guy is convinced that once they eradicate the Demon King, all the corrupt monsters will vanish from Antares. But Reifenhard just laughs inwardly. He thinks it's funny, because he has done nothing more than simply showing the demons how to live like humans. And now that they're retaliating after being mistreated for centuries, the humans are whining about it like a bunch of bitches. After leaning forward a bit, he asks if they've succeeded in defeating his 4 heavenly kings. To his query, Cyrus smugly speaks up once again, saying those stinky orcs were nothing more than cucumbers for his sword. When Reifenhard catches wind of his orc warrior Tathid's fate, he just gets even more ticked off. Seems like he has got a soft spot for his people, and he sees orcs as nothing more than innocent hunter-gatherers, not the monsters humans make them out to be. But when this beefed-up gorilla tells him that the troll king Athelka also bit the dust, Reifenhard practically starts blubbering like a toddler. He admits trolls look scary, but they are all about nature and spirituality. Looks like the poor Demon King is on a streak of disappointment, because Saint S. Flynn also admits that the evil dwarf who worshipped the god of darkness has also been taken down. After hearing this, the guy just grabs his forehead in sheer disappointment. But this time, he seems more bummed out by the fact that these idiots think that everyone except the 12 gods they worship is just plain evil. And as for the last heavenly king, this light mage known as Jade Archlight claims he has also sent the dark elf women beyond the boundary with his magic. Well, killing a sexy hot elf with pointy ears was the last straw, and the guy just explodes in frustration when he realizes he has lost his sweet Cirrus as well. The party tells this fuming king that the dark elf was a demon who had fallen to the dark side, and they feel no compassion for such creatures. Once again, the guy just facepalms himself, trying to knock some sense into this racist party. Like, come on, having darker skin does not automatically make you a villain. Also, her tan complexion can be blamed on humans directly, who kept cutting down all the trees where the elves lived, leaving them with nothing but barren lands and no shade to cover themselves from the sun. Honestly, after seeing things from this Demon King's angle, I am starting to think the real demons are the ones prepping to take down the king. And by now, Reifenhard has realized that reasoning with these hobos is like talking to a brick wall, especially when the hero of humanity starts blabbering the same old righteous spiel. So, he is gearing up, ready to face off with the hero. You see, Reifenhard is just trying to lend a hand to these otherworldly species, who are living like nothing more than slaves. But since he cannot convince humans to see things differently, he decides to take on the role of the Demon King himself. And boy, does he unleash a terrifying amount of energy. The ground shatters, and the entire party of righteous heroes gets scattered like ants. After becoming the incarnation of evil, or at least that is what these heroes think of him, we learn that he was just an ordinary great mage. Well, being great is not exactly ordinary, but you get the idea. Anyway, he noticed that creatures like elves are just seen as mere servants by the humans, only known for their long lives. The dwarves were turned into slaves who were good with their hands and mining, and orcs were always used only for menial work. Maybe the trolls had it the worst, who were hunted down and used as ingredients for healing potions. As much as other humans are cruel maybe, he was different. He lived with them, learned about their natures and cultures, and he happened to learn all kinds of magic from elves and sorcery from trolls. By combining this knowledge from these species, he was able to reach the 10th circle of magic for the first time in history, which is the highest form of magic that no human has ever achieved. After spending a good amount of time with these creatures, his perspective totally changed. Even though he saved them from human tyranny, humans kept sending knights to raid their colony and loot their lands. So, they ended up moving from place to place constantly. In the back and forth of these fights, they unintentionally took over human territory while saving their own lives. The place grew bigger and bigger until it became what we are now calling the Antares Empire. But their peaceful kingdom turned into a bloody mess when they did not fight back against humans. Reifenhard could not stand seeing his people getting killed anymore. To save his empire, he is now ready to do whatever it takes. As the hero rushes toward him, the dark mage just kicks the shiny guy, sending him rolling on the ground like a fidget toy. The hero ends up a gruesome mess, which clearly shows just how powerful this demon king really is. And after that one single blow, he is pretty sure that these guys are just speck of dust compared to his power. But it looks like there is another man to deal with before Reifenhart can rest again, and this guy is known for his strong physique, burning with fire and ready to change the tide of the battle. Dude wastes no time and lunges at the mage, but his first punch just shatters the ground. Just as the fiery guy marches forward to grab the mage once again, Reifenhart slips out of the building. But his escape proves futile, because the fiery monkey quickly catches up to him. Seeing his doom hovering above him, the mage braces himself for the blow. As the swing of the gorilla's hand gains momentum, it ignites with fire and hilariously connects with poor guy's head, leaving him with tears in his eyes and blood about to gush out of his mouth. Despite having a little fountain of blood gushing from his head, this guy still has the audacity to challenge the gorilla once again, and even the bulky dude has also starting to think that Reifenhart might actually have a really strong body. But strong, my ass. As we take a clear look at this wannabe magician, his height has shrunk from his broken spine. Blood is leaking out of his head, and he is pretty sure he is going to die at this rate. I guess my man is not really cut out for the whole villainy stuff. Anyway, just when the gorilla starts to crackle with his fire power once again, ready to give a final blow, the poor mage mumbles out few words and accepts his defeat. But his voice is faint to the point that it doesn't even pass through the gorilla's thick skull. Since everyone believes that Reifenhart is the one who is influencing those creatures to get violent, Teslan decides to kill him for good, to make things right once again. But as you already know, the mage did absolutely nothing other than show the monsters how to live freely, a life without slavery. Since this gorilla cannot understand that they are just fighting for their freedom, the mage decides not to give up, and starts going absolutely nuts. As a last resort, he pulls out this ancient relic out of his ass, which basically has the power to shatter even the reality itself. It is called the Eye of Time and Space, and it is his final gambit. I guess this artifact does indeed pack some punch, considering how the gorilla is losing his bananas after seeing it. I mean, we can clearly see where his shock is coming from. This little ball-like thing can actually make regression back in time possible, a phenomenon that totally defies the laws of nature. After introducing his little toy to us, he proceeds to activate it, and the gorilla just lunges at him on the spot, not wanting to let him activate the relic. It becomes a race against time, with Teslan coming from one side and Reifenhart about to activate his device. Just as this ball is on the verge of activation, the gorilla enters the scene. As soon as he hits the blob of fire, an explosion of bright light takes place. We can see both of them suspended in the air, and in the next moment, they are enveloped by an eye-blinding sphere of light. The scene then shifts to a very tranquil countryside, a complete contrast to the chaos we witnessed earlier. We are shown a wooden house, sunlight streaming through the window. Inside, a man is slowly waking up, muttering to himself if he is still kicking. Seems like the time regression worked, but my dude's clueless about where and when he has landed. Plus, he cannot remember if this place or house rings any bells. Anyway, he gets up, feeling the strength and muscle he is packing. But despite his ripped physique, he is kinda grossed out by all these muscles. In his mind, a mage should be about magic, not bulging biceps and scars. Back in his old body, he had no trouble catching the eye of elf girls with his looks, but now he is worried he will not be as attractive with this jacked up body. But most scary of all is that his face has also changed completely, and the only reason he could think of for this is that he has failed in proper time and space regression. But when he delves deeper, he notices these familiar thick eyebrows, a stubborn mouth, and the only thing that comes to mind is the indomitable martial king Teslan. Just as he is trying to wrap his head around the situation, a creak of the door interrupts, and in walks another behemoth, trying to squeeze through a normal-sized door. With a grin as wide as his chest, he tells our bewildered hero it is time for some hardcore training outside. But our guy is thrown off by this giant he has never seen before. He cannot help but blurt out with his shaky voice asking who the heck is this man. He almost has a mini heart attack when the big man leans in closer, telling him to cut the crap. But our guy insists he is serious, which only annoys the big dude even more. The hulking monster reminds our hero that he has pulled the amnesia act twice before to dodge his training. And since he is not in the mood for excuses right now, he simply grabs the boy's head like he is picking up a potato and starts dragging him outside for his scheduled workout. That is when Reifenhart realizes this must be the legendary guy, the ultimate martial artist of all time. That's right, he's the former martial king, Gerard. I guess we all know by now why the previous owner of this body used that amnesia trick. And after strapping the poor lad to the tree and taping up his noisy loud mouth, he proceeds to pick up a bamboo stick and decides to commence the training officially. The poor guy can do nothing but brace himself for his doom. And as you might have guessed, the big guy smacks the boy right in the gut, tears streaming down his face, veins bulging all over, and drool escaping from his mouth. He has no clue what he did to deserve this punishment. The master unleashes a barrage of stick strikes all over our hero's body, who is just thinking about the elf women he loved while taking his last breaths. It seems the master has started to entertain the idea that our hero might not be lying about the amnesia thing. He figures, since their training trademark is basically idiotic and excessive, it would not be surprising if any trainee suffered from short-term memory loss. Plus, even he himself has lost his memories a few times back in the day as well. But don't you worry, the old man has got it all figured out. He is convinced a few more of his blows will eventually make our hero feel better. But I am pretty sure this weakling mage is really not feeling that well. While dishing out his beating, the old man also imparts some wisdom, telling him that only weak humans rely on weapons instead of brute force. They make excuses about their weak physique, but in this old man's eyes, those people are just making excuses because they could not overcome their weakness. Martial artists train hard to overcome their physical limitations. While the poor dude is crying his eyes out, the master goes absolutely bonkers, bulging with sheer determination as he insists that the more you beat up a human, the stronger they become, just like steel. But as the boy is feeling absolutely annoyed to hear the man's stupid logic, this giant fuck gives yet another brutal whack to his face, hammering his point home that our hero is definitely on track to become that indomitable steel. He just keeps pounding away while spouting the same nonsense, and all that's left on our poor hero's mind are the blissful days of the past that he spent in the embrace of his pointy-eared sexy lady. By the time the sun has almost gone down, Reifenhardt's body is entirely broken, his skin looking like a baked potato and steaming off his body, wondering why the hell he had not died after that much of a beating. He sits back up, surrounded by all the bamboo sticks that had been on his body. Anyway, he bids a final thanks to his master for that beating before heading back. The night has finally descended, and there we see a steaming hot bathtub filled with herbal water. Inside, taking a good rest after that hectic day is our hero, bewildered to find himself sitting in a bathtub of healing potion. He has heard of queens bathing in milk for great skin, but this is on a whole other level, especially since a bottle of this stuff costs 10 silver coins and he has got a whole tub of it. So, he seriously asks the old man what's up with this medicinal bath, and the old man simply replies that after enough hammering, steel needs to be cooled down. At this point, our guy has started to think that maybe this training is not completely stupid. After training all day to the bone, he is recovering quickly instead of falling sick, which would just leave a sturdy body behind. It now makes sense why his spine got crushed by a single palm strike from the martial king in his past life. At least he is certain he is back in the past, but he is curious about himself in this timeline. He wonders if that version of Reifenhardt still exists, which also makes him curious if two souls can exist in the same time and space. To simplify things, he assumes that either he and his younger version are coexisting somehow, or maybe the martial king Teslan's soul is inside his younger self's body. The next day rolls in, and the master enthusiastically presents a giant platter of juicy, steamed meat. My guy is forced to chow down on all this deliciousness, and after that hefty meal, they start climbing a literally vertical mountain with a giant boulder strapped to our hero's back, which the old man insists is just a fucking light jog. Next up is balancing on a single finger, followed by heavy pull-ups with the rock still strapped to his back. After a day of such brutal training, he is completely knocked out on his bed, looking pale and exhausted. It's been almost a month of torture after his regression, and he is seriously thinking about running away instead of putting up with all this crap. He is also thinking right now about his other self in this world. He remembers that teenage Reifenhardt's still hustling to become a magician, so they are not likely to cross paths anytime soon. But when he thinks about Teslan taking over his body, all he can picture is the martial king grinding his frail body to the bone to bulk up, using the monstrous training regime of the Unbreakable Gym. He would definitely need a master's help for that, no way he could handle it solo. But if he did pull it off, he is pretty sure Teslan would come gunning for him again. Anyway, his first order of business is to get the heck out of this joint. After scanning the area and seeing no one in sight, he bolts, putting all his energy into his sprint, only to be met by his master casually perched atop a rock, blocking his path. The old man reminds him that it's his 9th attempt at escaping in a single month. But the boy finally gathers the courage to speak up, admitting that he is not the legendary Teslan. He admits that he's actually someone who goes by the name of Reifenhardt, who is just a mage, and not some fucking chunk of meat. The old man just chuckles, asking if they are having another late-night story session. Of course, our boy is taken aback by such a response, and that's when his master mentions that this is also the 3rd time he has tried to spin some wild fantasy about himself. Once he claimed to have met gods, and another time he swore he was from a place called Nurim. With a gentle pat on the head, the master commends him for his creativity, telling him to get back to bed. And so, despite failing this time, my guy is still somehow determined to break out of his prison. Another day rolls in, with yet another failed attempt at escaping. And the day after that, he still cannot even catch a break underwater. His master just drags him out of the river once again, telling him to just get better. Finally, he gives up on the thought of escaping. And just as he is feeling miserable for himself, the old man mentions that the gym Unbreakable martial arts have been around for 130 years. Of course, it is only natural that they have seen every trick in the book, and no disciple has ever managed to pull a fast one on any of their masters. Tears well up in our hero's eyes as he comes to terms with the fact that he is stuck here. Thus, he decides to tough it out and complete his discipleship time. That is how he braved the prison of suffering with his heart, and somehow managed to pass 2 years, making so many sacrifices along the way until he finally awakened his aura. It seems staying there for 2 years wasn't all bad after all. He feels pretty accomplished, managing to pull off such a feat while he is only in his 20s. But the old man just laughs it off, saying this was always part of the plan with Jim Unbreakable. He explains that the intense physical training has already boosted his vitality and helped him manifest his aura, and with a twinkle in his eye, he says it is time to move on to the next step. The boy then eagerly asks his master about the next training, wondering if he'll finally start to learn some actual martial arts. With a giant grin, the behemoth of a man mentions they will be sparring with each other. And well, I'm pretty sure this was probably the last thing our idiot hero wanted to hear. But nonetheless, 3 more years pass just like that. And after those well-spent days, the scene cuts to the Vasily Kingdom's southern region, deep in the rough terrain of the Larchid Mountains. There, we see a waterfall, and standing before it is our jacked-up boy. He starts gathering energy in his hand with his Calamity Horn technique. Once fully charged, he takes his stance and hits the giant slab of rock before him. Though he nearly demolishes the slab, it's clear he still has much work to do. Apparently, the Calamity Horn technique involves channeling all your strength into one spot of your body, creating a concentrated aura that looks like a horn. Hence the nickname. Despite making a big hole in the rock, he mentions he still needs to polish his technique to reach the 4th superposition. You see, the final stage of Calamity Horn has 9 superpositions, and a punch that sends 9 ripples can supposedly even kill the gods. The Teslan he knew in his past life had 7 superpositions as his limit, and even Master Gerard could only perform the 8th. Since the old man has gone down to the village for some stuff for the first time, our boy is determined to learn the 4th superposition to get permission to descend the mountain himself. Even though he might have bolted if given the chance before, now that he is set on gaining some serious power, he gets down to practicing. This is also a rare opportunity for him to practice his magic, so he uses one of his spells, summoning up a purple ball and sending it flying towards a nearby tree. Unfortunately, it fizzles out on impact, leaving behind nothing but a few minor burns. It appears that despite knowing how to use magic, his body is not allowing him to harness it completely and is refusing to build up mana inside it. Suddenly, he senses the presence of someone, which is definitely not human. As this unfamiliar figure takes a cautious step forward, it becomes apparent that it's a scrawny orc. Upon locking eyes with our hero, this intimidating creature threatens him, urging the boy to act as if he didn't see him if he values his skin. Since our guy was used to dealing with all sorts of creatures in his past life, he clocks the orc as a young one, probably a fugitive. Since these creatures are sensible type, he knows that the orc will try smoothing things out by talking. So, he surprises the green guy by speaking in the language of grace, asking if anyone is trying to chase him down. After getting startled to hear a human talking in his mother tongue, the orc confirms our hero's statement. To which, Reifenhardt just extends his hand for help, but he is not sure if this creature trusts him. The orc simply says he trusts him since he can see our hero's kind soul, not to mention he can speak the language of grace. But he is worried that helping him will only get our boy dragged into trouble. After being totally blown away by the orc's unsurprising smooth talk, our hero reassures him to just have a little faith. And with that, he starts doing his magical thing, putting up a barrier to seal the gaping hole, assuring the orc that his magic will help conceal his presence. First off, the creature is completely bewildered to see our idiot wielding magic powers. But when Reifenhardt asks why he shouldn't possess any magic, the orc simply reminds him that with his jacked up body, it is pretty hard to believe he is a magician too. Anyway, before vanishing to the other side of the hole, the orc does not forget to thank our hero for his kindness. Right on cue, Reifenhardt hears approaching voices. A bunch of guys are marching down towards our hero, looking quite annoyed at first glance. They rudely address Reifenhardt, asking him if he has seen any young orc nearby. One of them even promises a gold coin for information, though it is pretty clear they are just bluffing, since they do not intend to pay jack shit. But they are not getting anything that easily, since our hero does not intend to play along with their shoddy lies. That is when one of the men notices the orc's footsteps and decides to follow these until the very end. On the other hand, after feeling disappointed in himself for such a half-assed spell casting that did not even erase the footprints, the idiot makes it crystal clear that this is his turf, and he is not letting anyone near. Now, you would think these guys would take a hint, but nope, they are stubborn as mules, especially this dude with the long hair, named Bright. He starts calling our hero a brat, but the guy beside him seems a bit wiser. He points out that the boy does not seem like just any ordinary person. But Bright, ironically not being the brightest person in the room, just keeps on getting under Reifenhardt's skin. He seems quite confident that the stubborn kid could not throw hands against 10 people. Well, our heroes had enough of their yapping. He whips out a giant solid rock club with a magical spell, because apparently, his master told him not to use fists on the weak, and using a weapon against them is his version of mercy. So, keeping that in mind, he decides to break every bone with his weapon without letting them die. Although he would mainly been training with his fists, that did not mean the Gym of the Unbreakable did not offer weapon training. As the crowd below gets all hyped up, my man clenches his jaw and goes to town on these guys, swinging his club left and right. Even as they see their friends dropping dead, the other goons decide that it's smarter to attack even harder. Of course, they all meet the same painful fate within seconds. Now, this club is not about fancy combat moves, it is more about rigorous discipline training. But he is not holding back, especially since these guys are mercenaries who make a living by swinging swords. And let me tell you, even though this club spinning technique does not have any fancy defensive moves, he does not need them in the first place. The moment one of these idiots tries to strike him, his sword just bends and breaks, and poor man gets a solid slam over the head. At this point, even the idiot himself is completely bewildered by what's happening. Sure, he gets that he is built like a tank, but bending freaking swords upon impact is just too much for him to wrap his head around. Anyway, even after my man's been swinging his club for what feels like forever, he is pretty sure these guys are not gonna kick the bucket, even if their bones are smashed and joints are broken. After putting them through the ringer, Reifenhart finally calls it quits. But Bright, despite getting his butt handed to him, still has enough strength left to be a jerk with his words. So, my man gives him one last smack upside the head to teach him a lesson once and for all. And would believe it, that final smack seems to knock some sense into the cocky guy, who sheepishly thanks our hero before hightailing it out of there. Now, you would think Reifenhart would be relieved to see them go, but nope. This sadistic guy was having the time of his life beating the snot out of them. And it seems like he is starting to subconsciously absorb his master's philosophy of pounding on others. Anyway, the orc finally emerges from hiding and expresses his gratitude for hiding his behind. And for that, he bows in respect and pledges to repay the kindness. Furthermore, he accepts Reifenhart as his mentor and even goes as far as to put his life on the line if given the chance. You see, in orc culture, a mentor is like a guiding light, someone to be revered, much like how a knight serves their lord among humans. With deep respect, the orc asks for our hero's name. At first, the boy tosses out Teslan, but then he hesitates, takes a moment, and decides to go with Reifenhart Walled Antares. When the orc hears this name, he pledges to remember it for the rest of his days. Then, our hero asks where the orc plans to head off to, considering every place is crawling with humans. The green guy just shrugs and says he is aiming to wander around, searching for a place to rest. If he cannot find one, he would rather wander to his demise than live as a human slave. But then, Reifenhart suggests him to head beyond the Larchid Mountains, a place famous among orcs as the Land of Trails, where orcs live peacefully in hiding, specifically in the Blue Bear tribe. After that, the orc proceeds to walk away to his next destination. But before they disappear from each other's sight, the boy asks about this green guy's name. In response, the orc reveals from afar that he is the son of Crota, heir to Lat's axe, known as Tathid. Upon hearing this familiar name, Reifenhart's memory jogs out, and he realizes that this guy is the same Tathid, who once grew up to become one of his 4 heavenly kings in his past life. At this point, the idiot's feeling a tad sheepish. If the real Teslan had bumped into this orc, he probably would not have lent a helping hand to him. He is now afraid that he might have already changed the future a bit by helping that guy. But despite all that, his heart is all warm and fuzzy to reunite with his comrade. And it is not just Tathid that is making his heart cry, but he also just could not forget about the other 3, the troll, the elf, and even that old dwarf. He is dying to see them again. They were his friends, his family, and everything he had. After that heart-pounding encounter with his friend, another half a year zips by, and winter rolls in. The first thing we see is the master's fist ablaze with fire. With one mighty swing, he sends a fiery blow hurtling towards our terrified Reifenhart, who is giving it his all to block with his spiral guard. Barely making it out alive, he is greeted with a thumbs up from the old man, proud of his disciple for taking his spiral guard to new heights. Feeling all warm and such about how far his student has come, the old man cannot help but remind him of the time he tried to hightail it in the past. And would you believe it, it has been a solid 10 years of apprenticeship since the old man took our hero under his wing. Sure, the boy has definitely gotten stronger, but the master cannot help but notice the guy is still as puny as he was a decade ago. But the boy quickly defends himself, pointing out that he is already 190 centimeters tall. However, the old man just scoffs, considering them as nothing more than rookie numbers. Apparently, a member of Gym Unbreakable should be over 2 meters tall at least. Those 3 martial kings who came before them were like giants in comparison to our hero. At this point, the old man's practically bursting with determination. He shouts at our hero, demanding to know if he is messing up his breathing technique. He is on him like a hawk, but poor Reifenhart cannot help but remember that Teslan guy he met was around 2.3 meters tall as well. So, he reminds his master that it is just a matter of constitution. But as we take a peek into this bastard's head, we can hear him admitting that if he uses the breathing technique now, his body would become monstrous, which is the last thing he would want happening to his body. But surprisingly enough, the master decides to cut him some slack. As long as he is sturdier and more powerful, he does not care. So, Reifenhardt decides to unleash his true strength to prove himself. He awakens his power, leaps into the air, and comes swinging back with his calamity horn. The moment he hits the ground with his fourth superposition, chaos erupts. The ground shakes, everything goes haywire, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. And all the while, the old man's just cackling like a maniac, loving every moment of his student wreaking havoc. After that impressive display of power, his master gives him the green light to venture outside and see the world, and this unexpected gesture catches the boy totally off guard. But the old man confirms it once again, stating that the apprenticeship has ended, and Reifenhardt is now free to live as he pleases. He is free to choose his path, whether it is one of evil or good. It is the little price of training our hero has endured until now, and hearing this, he is totally moved by his master's words. The old man then recalls the advice he got from the third martial king years ago. First off, he told him to accumulate wealth only through hard work, not by stealing. Secondly, he should stand by the side of the unjustly treated whenever possible. And lastly, he must ensure to continue the martial legacy of the gem unbreakable at any cost. To do that, the master instructs Reifenhardt to instill the teachings into a disciple to pass them down. As the old man tosses a pouch of coins, he advises Reifenhardt to take his sweet time finding a worthy disciple since pure talent is hard to come by. Although the 30 silver coins are enough to last half a year, Reifenhardt's dumbfounded to see that this supposedly rich old coot, who claimed to have a mansion in the capital, could only cough up this measly amount. Anyway, he hands our hero a map to a treasure left at Settlard Mountain. With that, Reifenhardt sets off on his journey. He glances back dramatically, eyeing the mountain, but in the next moment, it erupts like a volcano, giving the dude a literal heart attack. And guess who's behind the explosive farewell? Yep, his master, who tells him not to dwell on goodbyes, to run with determination without looking back, and to take pride in inheriting his teachings. Well, I bet that guy will not be forgetting the chaotic farewell anytime soon. The scene shifts to the town. Inside a hotel, we see the village chief gearing up to face off with a noble, but the guy behind the old man warns that chatting with nobles could be risky. Still, he manages to catch the attention of one of the knights in shining armor. With a bit of reluctance, the old man straightforwardly asks the knight to cough up what he and his buddies owe for their meal. The knight seems pretty ticked off by the demand but reluctantly tosses a ducat anyway, which is the local currency of this continent. However, when the old man checks out the coin, he points out that it is not nearly enough. Well, this prompts the noble to lose his cool, wondering aloud if the old man has ever seen a gold coin before. And to top it off, he throws a solid punch at the old man's face for daring to ask for more money than his social status allows. After taking that heavy blow, the old man and his companions could do nothing other than fume in anger. Apparently, these knights are worse than bandits, pillaging their homes and food just for a measly ducat. Then, to add insult to injury, another arrogant voice pipes up, suggesting maybe these regular folks do not deserve any payment at all. The scene switches to one of our hero's memories from his past life, where he can be seen having a blast with the love of his life. There's this one memory that sticks with him the most, where Cirrus compliments him on his sharp, precise, and well-structured body, which can be directly compared to a finely crafted blade. However, in the present moment, the dude is bawling like a baby, kicking himself for looking all ripped and chiseled. Though he's happy about one thing, which is that he's much taller now. Anyway, putting jokes aside, my man is genuinely worried about his girl. He recalls that this is the exact year she'll be auctioned off. But since he can't just storm into the auction hall recklessly, he's stuck with no way to rescue her unless he can scrape together enough cash to cover the astronomical sum it takes to buy a slave. So, to make a quick buck, he decides to rely on his past memories and his current physical strength to raid the ancient ruins before reaching Chatton. The scene cuts back to the arrogant knight from before. Right now, he is inquiring to his trusty mage if he happened to find any leads on the location of the ancient ruins. To which, the magician simply demands more time. This guy is Delphia's mage, specialized in archaeology, known as Todd. Though their motives are still hazy, we can hear this arrogant man dropping a hint about the burial site of some big-shot swordsman, who is known as Sir Claude von Leaders Altian. In any case, let us hope we get some clarity on what these guys are up to soon enough. The next scene cuts to our hero, who had been seemingly wandering around for 3 days. His destination appears to be north, toward the Hatton Mountains, on the Central Road. He is apparently using artificial flashback, a skill from the old legends that lets him revisit memories at any time, and by using this, he is recalling his past adventures at the ancient ruins of the Hatton Mountains. Before his regression, he met a mage named Todd at Delphia's Mage Tower, who told him about exploring those ruins with the Altrian family of knights. Now, it seems our hero is about to cross paths with those arrogant knights we saw earlier. Turns out, he has been there in those ruins in his past life as well and managed to find the real treasure that Todd's party missed. And let me tell you, he is grinning ear to ear, merely at the thought of nabbing all that treasure for himself once again. As the path before him comes to a dead end, he finds himself standing before the cattle village, looking just as good as he remembered. Meanwhile, inside one of the hotels, the people of the village can be seen in panic. It seems that those arrogant knights want a guide to show them the way to the Valley of Death. But no villager wants to go near that haunted place. As they are seething with anger, cursing those nobles, one brave soul decides to step up and agree to go with them. But you can bet his wife and kid immediately talk some sense into him, making him reconsider. But just as he has started to consider staying, the villagers shoot him soul-piercing glares, telling him to stick to his words. But just then, they spot a disgusting face pressed against the window, trying to scare the living daylights out of everyone. The guy immediately grabs his bow and arrow, demanding to know who the fuck this mysterious man is. The dude comes up with a shoddy excuse, claiming he happened to overhear their conversation while passing by, so he decided to volunteer. Somehow, his half-assed story actually works, and he gets a pass to get inside. Everyone in the hall is terrified by his presence, and their jaws drop even further when they find out he knows every nook and cranny of the region. But the villagers still warn him about the dangers lurking there. However, the boy reassures them, reminding them once again that he knows this place like the back of his hand, and not to mention, he has been there before. Almost 50 years ago, there was a king from the Altians known as Claude. At the young age of 45, which is not quite young actually, he managed to awaken his aura and went on all kinds of adventures. His heroic stories were spread all over the Vasily kingdom, but fame often breeds arrogance, and Claude ventured into the Valley of Death with just one servant and ended up meeting his demise there. The problem was that the demonic sword Altian, a symbol of the Altian family passed down for generations, was lost with him. And the efforts to find that sword went on for more than 50 years. As our hero marches forth on the quest with Stefan von Rapanto Altian, in search of the lost sword, he cannot help but speculate that this noble might just be the grandson of Claude himself, considering they belong to the same family as the legendary figure who perished in that dungeon. When the guy sees an elf woman getting cozy with her master, I cannot say for sure if he is feeling jealous of their camaraderie. Anyway, he notices there is only one saint in the party named Sillin, who seems quite young. This raises doubts in our hero's mind about whether this young gun can even perform any divine spells. But most of all, he is totally creeped out to see how this seemingly male individual looks so feminine. Just when he decides to talk with Todd, the only person he has seen from his previous life, he hesitates for a moment, unsure if he should interrupt these two, getting all lovey-dovey. But witnessing the affection in Todd's eyes for this feminine guy, the idiot literally creeped out to his core, wondering if this is the same Todd he knew. But then, out of nowhere, this dude catches up to our hero, telling him that the villagers were just scared for nothing about going to the dungeon when they have the kingdom's brave knights accompanying them. Hearing this, Reifenhart just gets totally creeped out by the man getting full of himself, which proves his point clearly that chivalry does indeed make narcissists out of men. Suddenly, they hear violent roars of monsters, appearing out of the forest and sprinting into the sky like bullets. And in the next moment, these fury beasts turn their trajectory and start crashing down to the ground, aiming to take down all of these humans. As soon as one of those beasts extends its sharp claw, the cocky knight takes his stance and orders his knights to attack. Almost instantly, Todd unleashes his firepower, turning the entire sky into a fiery mess, while the feminine saint casts her magical spell, boosting every soldier's strength and vitality. Watching this group of knights fight, our hero starts to think they are not that bad after all, but still, they are only good from the perspective of a mage. From a martial artist's view, they are more or less trash. Anyway, just as he glances over his left shoulder, he sees those poor slave orcs in grave danger. Before the disgusting beast could tear those soldiers apart, our hero delivers a solid punch right to that bastard's face. The single punch obliterates the monster into hundreds of pieces, and he is pretty glad no one's paying attention to his abomination powers. At this point, he remembers that villager, and he is pretty sure if that guy had come along on Todd's adventure, the poor guide would have been toast. Seeing how this man is slashing down monsters, seemingly fighting only for himself while his underlings are dropping like flies, our hero's pretty sure this bastard is not a good person. But I guess there is always room for surprises, as this red-headed feminine boy tells our hero to hide to save himself. But just as he is scanning the battlefield, a beast shoots its sharp, metal-solid feathers. They do not even tickle our hero, but when one hits his eye, he is screaming at the top of his lungs from the sheer pain. So, he punches this creature like before, turning it into bits and pieces too. He also mentions that there are only so many tears he could shed, and he has already bawled out enough during his training. After the threat is neutralized, the cocky leader asks for a casualty report, and inquires about the mages and priests. Todd assures him that everyone is safe. Over in the corner, our hero grumbles about how these folks do not seem interested in considering their safety. Anyway, the leader stands tall and hollers in determination after winning that battle, and his whole crew falls in line with him. To savor the moment of triumph, he orders everyone to take a breather before continuing their journey. In that moment, our hero seizes the chance to finally chat with Todd. After giving him props for his efforts in the battle, he casually asks if he is from Delphia's Mage Tower, since his buddy's there too. Todd perks up at the mention of his friend, so the boy further drops the name of his supposed friend, which is not surprisingly Reifenhart. Double Chin immediately gets confused, wondering why a kid like Reifenhart would be friends with a rough and tough guy like our hero, unless there is more to their relationship than just friendship. Anyway, the mage mentions that he has been spending his days learning magic, but it seems this is not what our boy wanted to inquire about. So, he specifically asks if anything weird has happened to Reifenhart in the last few years. To which, Todd simply shrugs, saying nothing much, except his nose bridge is still as high as ever, and just thinking about it gets him all excited. As this dude drools over our hero's original body, my guy can barely contain his anger. With a clenched jaw and bulging veins, he asks if Reifenhart's attitude has changed at all, to which the mage replies he is not really sure, since he has never been that close to that kid. Suddenly, the saint calls the boy from behind, asking if he requires any support, but he responds with a no and directs her attention towards those orcs. He immediately gets on healing them. But just as he was helping those docile creatures, one of the soldiers butts in, telling him that these creatures can just get better by simply licking their bodies so he does not have to waste his energy on them. But despite what others are saying, the femboy keeps on healing nonetheless. It does not take our boy long to realize how kind-hearted he is, unlike these other humans who are the lowest of the low. And let us not forget about this bastard, who is probably the lowest scum. He has really started to get on our hero's nerves with his swagger. In any case, just as he is ordered, he starts giving directions towards their destination. But as he does, we can clearly see that this fucker is definitely cooking something, and even the cocky dude catches on to his suspicious behavior. After trekking for about an hour, the whole party looks like deflated balloons after battling wolves and other monsters back to back. While the leader screams his lungs out in frustration, mercilessly urging his exhausted squad to keep trudging along, my guy can be seen snickering like a devil, intentionally leading them through a tougher path. You see, knights might be arrogant, and priests might be stubborn, but mages are simply narrow-minded and cheap to the bone, and our hero is a mage to his core. I mean, he at least put them on the fastest path possible, and he definitely did not choose this route just to mess with them. After relentless monster fights for the past few hours, the platoon leader finally understands how this place drove Sir Claude to his death. But just when all hope seems lost, the man's face lights up with hope as he finally spots the dungeon before his eyes. In no time, he and his companions burst into happiness, marking the end of their journey to the ancient ruins. After a bit more walking, they finally rock up right before the entrance of the place. And after seeing no traps outside, Todd gives them the green light to enter, and the platoon leader tells his squad to gear up. However, the captain makes it clear that since our hero's work is done, he can head back. But our boy insists on staying outside, claiming that he could not bear going back to the village alone. So, Altian decides to protect him on the way back, just to honor his hard work. But once again, my guy can barely contain his anger upon realizing that this bastard never had considered protecting him on their way back before this moment. In any case, the leader charges his entire squad, and everyone starts rushing inside to defeat the creature who had been sleeping for centuries. Seeing them go in with such flair, my guy just waves his hand with a cocky, mischievous smile, and once he is finally alone outside, he decides to get to work on what he came here for. Right now, this place, the ancient ruins of Paulton, is crawling with monsters and spirits. But back in the Silver Age, it was just a regular logistics base, nothing fancy. Even if it was just a regular base back then, the tech in the Silver Age was like something out of a sci-fi movie, which makes it pretty valuable. Once he steps inside, memories of his past come rushing back. He recalls exploring this dungeon with his pointy-eared beauty, who guided him through the uncharted territory and unlocked every secret path. But just as he is getting nostalgic, X-rated stuff starts creeping into his mind. Thinking back on it, it was quite bold of them to literally be fucking around inside a dangerous dungeon. Thankfully, the author has chosen to blur this out, just so you guys can keep your cool and pay attention to the story. Once he gets to the familiar secret door, he tries to work his magic to open it, but the door does not seem to budge with the little magic energy he has. After a bit of struggle, he finally manages to get it unstuck. But before he goes any further, he sheds his expensive coat to keep it clean. Then, before busting through those walls, he gives himself a good stretch. Just as he is limbering up, he hears some pretty intense screams up ahead. Naturally, the idiot is curious why there are screams coming from that way when he clearly saw those goons heading in the opposite direction. As he is thinking, he remembers how this secret path is basically a backdoor, leading directly to the third floor of the basement. Naturally, opening it means that they are kinda trespassing. Yep, him and the gang of goons ahead are all trespassers now. Since this place is a military building, it is no shocker that the security system would kick in, unleashing all sorts of defenses to repel intruders. Back in the day, he and Cirrus had free reign, so they did not worry about other areas. But now, Altion's group has stumbled into a trap that has dropped them down to the second floor. So yeah, everyone is pretty much royally fucked. And as you can imagine, the poor soldiers are getting torn to shreds inside that trap. And this cocky knight is just standing there frozen in horror, watching his comrades get sliced like cucumbers. The chef in charge of this gruesome vegetable chopping is none other than a behemoth wielding a scythe, towering above them with multiple hands wielding many blades, ready to turn those soldiers into mincemeat. It is pretty clear to the platoon leader that they are not getting out of this mess alive. While the femboy attends to the injured as usual, everyone seems grateful for his help. However, it turns out this guy is not as kind or warm-hearted as we thought. His intentions become clear as he mutters to himself that keeping the soldiers alive is the only way he can survive. He also thanks Double Chin for saving him from the floor collapse earlier, but Double Chin is not sugarcoating anything, mentioning that the danger has not passed yet. And with that speak of devil, a monster crashes the party through the main door, tossing soldiers aside like pebbles. They have no choice but to scramble out of the way, as these monsters seem straight out of nightmares. The femboy works his charm once again, rallying the soldiers with what seems like will and courage. But in reality, he is more like a puppet master, pulling their strings to make them fight. It is not about bravery, it is about using every resource available, even if it means turning them into mindless warriors. As the mindless soldiers advance without their will, Double Chin is blown away by the extent of magic this femboy had to put in, just so he can turn those soldiers into berserkers. In any case, I can tell that these poor guys are about to face their death. On the other hand, this zesty-ass Double Chin guy pulls out some fancy moves to support the soldiers. With his magic, he makes those steel swords float in the air, leaving the monsters completely defenseless. Meanwhile, the elf knight is also fighting, probably on behalf of Altion. Not gonna lie, she has got some solid moves. But despite her flexibility, one blow nearly shatters her bones, sending her crashing into a nearby wall. After that single hit, she's just a bloody mess, and despite being on her last legs, she still asks her master if she was any help. And even though the guy who's usually arrogant and cocky, he responds positively to her question, giving her a verbal thumbs up for her efforts. He also seems to be dishing out some solid moves, slashing down those monsters and leaving nothing but blood with each swing he makes. While the others recognize their master's strength, they cannot help but feel overwhelmed by the looming threat. Still, their leader roars with determination, telling them not to lose hope and reminding them that even Sir Claude, the great knight, was defeated right here. But I guess those encouraging words are about to be pointless, since no one is going to withstand the flames raining down from above. And it is not just any flames, a gigantic monster crashes down to the ground. This hound of fire literally looks like something straight out of hell. With a deafening roar, the hellhound starts smashing down those ordinary soldiers as if they were mere annoyances in his way. But despite facing this hellish creature, Altion encourages his subordinates not to lose their ground. To inject some resolve and a sense of responsibility into the terrified soldiers, he questions if they have forgotten that they are the brave knights of Altion. But let us be real here, this motivational bitch could not do a damn thing when facing off against a monster the size of an airplane, bringing hell itself into existence with each fiery blow. But despite facing such an overwhelming power, this arrogant guy just clenches his jaw out of anger and vows to himself not to be defeated by these monsters. So, he tightly grabs his sword and foolishly marches towards that creature with sheer foolishness in his eyes. He strikes the beast with one of his sword techniques, but he is brutally smacked in return. A mere flick of that monster's finger sends him soaring back to the ground. Even after hitting the ground, he is gliding like a pebble on water. By the time he loses the momentum of the strike, he is pretty much dead, if not entirely. After he is out of the picture, the femboy steps in with his pinky powers, trying to smack the giant beast with his plus-sized weapon. Despite the blow seeming deadly, the creature is just a little annoyed by this sneaky attack. The glare it gives literally leaves the femboy sweating profusely, his hands trembling out of sheer threat. Not surprisingly, the annoyed beast lunges at the red-headed boy, but just as he braces himself for the attack, someone jumps into the scene and smacks the creature right over its overgrown face. That single blow is enough to send the monster flying, and when the pinky raises his head again, he sees bulging muscles and a man who looks nothing short of dependable and heroic. Just as he readies himself to face off with the creature, he is totally startled for a moment because the beast does not seem to be retaliating, and as it turns out, it only took one punch to scatter that beast into pieces. He now has no doubt why he felt the grip of death when he took merely one blow from Teslan back then. In any case, he takes a glance around him, only to see everyone knocked out unconscious. But before going to town with these undead creatures, he decides to move the soldiers aside to prevent them from getting further injured. The Double Chin guy is absolutely boggled out of his mind to see our hero's strength. They are further bamboozled when they see him smashing those monsters into smithereens with just one hand while carrying the injured elf. Once the threat is neutralized, the platoon leader comes back from his unconsciousness, and his eyes nearly pop out when he takes a look around, finding the monsters dead. Naturally, he curiously asks his subordinate what the hell happened, and when he hears all about what went down, he is just shocked out of his mind. He still cannot believe that our hero was the one who cleared the dungeon single-handedly. But he has to face reality. So, with a warmer tone, he respectfully apologizes to our boy in a roundabout way for not recognizing his strength and humbly asks for his name. Just as the boy is about to give out his real name, he remembers that Todd already knows Riefenhart from the Mage Tower. So, to avoid any confusion, he introduces himself as Reifen. While the henchman behind the platoon leader feels suspicious of our hero's identity, the knight seems to totally buy Riefenhart's fake name and further asks about what family he belongs to, but the boy simply states that he does not belong to any. Well, that only makes the already suspicious henchman even more suspicious, entertaining the fact that a strong person could not just be a random regular dude. But just when we thought this arrogant guy had some room to be a good person, he taps our hero's shoulder and gives him props for acting as side helper for the job they had already almost completed. However, Riefenhart is not too pleased with this guy stealing all the glory and lets him know he was barely even a background character in the whole fight. After being rudely flung aside by our hero, the cocky guy gets ticked off, but his henchmen tell him to chill, reminding him that Reifen is just a regular guy, so manners might not be his strong suit. The boss kinda agrees but still wants to know who taught him to fight like that. Reifen just shrugs it off, saying he picked up some moves while wandering around. The fact that he lied is that he wants to keep his teacher's identity on the down low. After all, the guy is famous across the continent, and he does not want to attract any unnecessary attention. At this point, even Altian starts to raise an eyebrow at this guy's stories. But Riefenhart just changes the subject, reminding them they should focus on tending to the injured instead of playing detective. By the looks on the henchmen's faces, you can tell the boy is not slipping past his watchful eyes. Riefenhart reminds them once again to get moving and do their part. Meanwhile, the henchman cannot help but notice how chill our hero is, oozing confidence and all. After putting these attributes together, he starts thinking he might be someone with real clout and maybe even royal from another place. Despite Reifen's younger appearance, the man cannot shake off the feeling that his speech pattern is like talking to someone older. Anyway, the saint barges into the scene, and he appears to be really impressed by our hero's sheer size and height. He then starts bombarding Riefenhart with questions about his origin, his strength, and everything about him. Before we progress the plot further, here is the little short story about this guy. Apparently, Silin Filmarsis had lost his parents early and was raised in the orphanage. There, he got picked on a lot for being weak and pretty. But the sad thing is, it kinda made him long for stuff he did not have, like a strong body and a deep voice. At this point, he even dreamed of becoming a monk, proving their devoutness through their body. However, reality was far from his expectations. His height did not change, puberty never came, and for some reason, his hair grew really fast. As a last resort, he even tried hitting the weights, hoping to change things up. But all he got was more divine power from treating his workout injuries. And right now, that is precisely why he feels so much admiration for Riefenhart's chiseled physique and huge size. After getting creeped out, the idiot makes an excuse to find the exit and starts walking down. But the femboy insists on going with him. However, the hero reminds him that a healer is still needed there to tend the injured. That is when the platoon leader himself decides to go with our hero for the exploration. I guess Riefenhart cannot really say no, so off they go together. As we are strolling along, let us peek into the knight's mind. There we learn that despite his reluctance, he knows he has got to play nice with Reifen since he is going to be a big help in this exploration. He even thinks Reifen must be feeling pretty proud for escorting a knight. Then again, we know that my man could not care less about these goons. Still, this silly knight just does not seem to catch on, and he is just itching to flex his muscles at the right moment so he can make our hero his biggest fan for helping him out. Thankfully for us, his moment of glory is cut short when he takes a firm hit and falls to the ground for a sweet nap. And just as he lies there unconscious, the monsters start to pour out of the tunnel. As soon as they lunge at our hero, my man just turns them into dust with his bare fists. After clearing the path, he proceeds to move forward to check out the loot he is about to snag. So, as soon as he enters the room, he starts rummaging through all the useless stuff in hopes of finding something valuable. A moment later, he stumbles upon a limitless bag, a magic tool that allows one to store items up to 10 times the size of the bag, and the weight will be reduced to a tenth. Not only that, he also nabs a heavenly brazier, a returning dagger, and a magical sapphire, which are all supposed to fetch a heavy amount. After grabbing the treasure, he heads back to the knight who is nursing his aching head, trying to figure out what the hell happened. My man casually puts all the blame on those dead creatures, who supposedly sneaked up on the knight from behind and knocked him out. Hearing this, the knight reluctantly swallows his pride and painfully thanks our hero for his help. But the boy tells him not to sweat it, since this crazy fucker knows that it's only the beginning of knocking out the poor knight. So, while Reifenhart was swiping all the treasure for himself, he ended up knocking the platoon leader out 3 more times in the process, making sure that he stays unconscious while he completes his business. Surely at this point, even the platoon leader is starting to smell something fishy. Despite being on high alert, he keeps getting knocked out without any warning, and starts to wonder if maybe his body needs a snack. Meanwhile, my man's grinning from ear to ear, having filled up his bag to the max. He eventually decides it is time to head back and come back another day for the loot. So, he tells the platoon leader they have explored all they can, and it is time to return back to the party. After reuniting with the soldiers on their walk forward, the saint asks our hero the same question if he is royal, but his response remains the same, questioning what is weird about a regular citizen being skilled. The femboy points out that his way of talking is really mature, and as a martial artist, he understands that he has to be confident. But he did not expect him to talk so casually with henchman Edward, who is well over 40. I guess he has a point, so Reifenhart decides to keep that in mind, and proceeds to tell the dude that he is just not cut out for great etiquettes. In any case, during their short talk, they have finally reached the door, and as soon as they cross the threshold, everyone's jaws hang in the air when they find this beast right before their eyes. This monster is known as Grellbeast, and simply calling it a giant creature would be quite an understatement. It appears that Reifenhart is a bit confused to see this monster, as he cannot recall this thing guarding these ruins in his previous life's exploration. I guess he has arrived here way too early, and no one has taken this big baddie down yet. Instead of confronting the monster, he suggests the party head back, as it will be hard to take care of that thing with this force. But then, one of the soldiers points out that this monster is wielding the demonic sword Altian. After seeing that sword, it goes without saying that this foolish knight has decided to take that monster down. While our hero insists on going back and preparing before indulging with this monster, the platoon leader refuses to back down. He challenges the monster by raising his sword into the air, and the soldiers behind him do not have a shred of doubt in their leader's judgment. But my man on the sideline cannot help but be creeped out for their foolish decision. As you might have already guessed, the soldiers are getting ripped to shreds by this monster. But Altian recklessly lunges at the monster anyway, only to be met with a devastating blow right to his belly. Blood gushes out of his mouth as he gets brutally smacked against the wall behind him. Despite the bone-wrecking impact, he reassures his concerned henchman that he is alright. And let us not forget about the elf woman, always there to rescue her master from danger. With a godly leap into the air, she swings her sword and strikes the monster. But she is only met with a deadly blow to her side, and blood stubbornly comes out of her mouth despite her best efforts to clench her teeth tightly. In the next moment, the monster decides to kick things up a notch and unleashes a gigantic cannon of fire that eradicates everything in its path. The soldiers try to run out as fast as possible, but there seems to be no hope for these poor fellas. Just as the fire is about to reach our femboy, my guy swoops in at the nick of time and directly takes the fire with his bare hands, dispersing it like it is no big deal. After that close save, Reifenhart does not forget to apologize for jumping in late, as he was startled for a moment. Looks like it is time for our hero to unleash his devastating power on this creature, and by the looks of his face, it is clear he is not going to mess around. He takes his stance and starts to gather his full power to put it to the test and see the extent of his abilities. He admits he would not have taken such a gamble as a mage unless he was sure the odds of winning are 100%. Now that he has changed a bit, he enjoys the thrill of messing with people who might seem more powerful than him. He starts off the fight by just poking the beast. And of course, this wild creature retaliates without a second thought. The demonic sword grazes the boy's shoulder, which is the first time he has seen his body, which can withstand steel, punctured by just a mere graze of that demonic sword. Caught off guard, the monster seizes the opportunity and lands a hit on the hero, making him cough up blood with a single blow. He is sent flying with just a kick, crashing into the nearby wall, destroying it like it is made of Lego. But my man is no ordinary Joe. He is practically the second coming of Giga Chad, or what the kids these days refer to as a Sigma. He brushes himself off from the rubble, assuring the femboy that he was just warming up. This was the first time the redhead had seen the power of an aura user, but let us be real, that's not really all that there is to it. As I have told you many times, my man is just on a whole different level. He is pretty confident that if he had not let his guard down, he could have easily taken that sucker down. As the monster starts jabbering away in its own language, Reifenhart just thinks it is challenging him for spar, so he gears up and lets loose a flurry of punches, while the beast is not holding back either and retaliates with the same energy. Meanwhile, this once cocky knight is finally getting a reality check. After seeing our hero unleash the power of aura, it has become one of the greatest challenges just figuring out how this seemingly commoner possesses such powers when nobles among nobles failed to manifest it. The more he watches Reifen fight, the more terrified he feels. Even the monster struggles against his punches. He has finally reached his breaking point, and it is only a matter of time before he explodes in tears. And further, seeing our hero pounding this monster like a pizza dough just leaves him in a loop about who the real monster is here. But still, the battle seems far from over, and their hack and slash continues. My man is having the time of his life, finally getting a punching bag to see the extent of his power. With the next blow, he obliterates the hand of the creature in which he was holding his sword. But despite that, the monster seems to be healing rapidly, getting all of its power from the dungeon itself. But whatever the case, this is not nearly enough to make our hero break a sweat. Once he gets near to the creature, he grabs its hand, slam dunks the beast, then gives it a brutal kick to the face followed by a barrage of punches. At this point, even he has started to feel that he is just having too much fun. So, to not spoil himself further, he decides to put an end to this using the Calamity Horn to obliterate the beast in one punch. But he is afraid that using the Calamity Horn will burn down the entire dungeon, and there are other people to consider. Just as he is pondering this escalating mess, Double Chin imparts his wisdom, reminding our hero to use his aura-covered sword. But the boy already knew about such things. The main concern here is that he does not know how to cover his weapons with aura. Double Chin has absolutely no clue what the heck this man is talking about. But the boy confirms it once again, mentioning that all he knows is how to use aura on his body, and this is the only thing his martial clan taught him. That is when the femboy also chimes in from behind, confirming if his body has high durability, to which he confirms immediately. With that in mind, the redhead starts casting one of his spells, which zaps my guy's entire nervous system like a sting bee. After this unwarranted spell casting, the boy goes nuts and flings the monster right into the wall like it is no big deal. Although Riefenhart can be seen struggling after having that spell cast upon him, the maniac, who looks innocent on the outside, has not even hesitated before casting a divine spell known as Holy Striking, which they only use to cast over metal objects. Seeing this guy getting all fired up after doing something this diabolic, Riefenhart is pretty sure that this must be a devil with a pretty face. Anyway, he charges toward the monster with his stiff and hardened body, delivering a devastating kick right below the monster's jaw, which is followed by a solid knee smash. And as for the grand finale, he lands a proper divine punch. After that punch, everything freezes for a moment for some dramatic effect, and in the next moment, the giant just explodes, turning into a million pieces while my man stands in his same stance after his final blow. As the remnants of the monster are raining down, yet another dramatic moment begins, and this time it appears that this femboy has finally found the love of his life. Suddenly, Ruin's energy starts acting up, and before you know it, the power that once surged just dissipates, signaling the end of the struggles inside this dungeon. While the femboy looks around bewilderedly, asking for confirmation that everything's over, my man can be heard complaining, telling him to lay off his charm of steel. As the scattered soldiers gather up once again, Altian also stands up with the help of his henchmen. Despite his miserable state, he calls out Rifen for holding back his powers and hiding his true identity. He wonders if Rifen had fun sneering as he watched everyone struggle. But the boy simply lets him know that he never sneered. In fact, he was never interested in anyone and paid no attention whatsoever. So, he wonders to himself why the hell he is being accused of something he never did. But out of the blue, he starts strolling down without a care in the world. Which only makes Altian further annoyed, who wields his sword to strike Riefenhart for not letting him fully show his knightly honor. But my man simply bends down to grab the demonic sword, causing the idiot to lose his balance. The already injured man starts falling off from his high perch like a sack of potatoes. What's even funnier is that our clueless hero wasn't even trying to dodge the attack. He just merely bent down to pick up the sword, only to hand it back to Altian. While henchmen can be seen praising Rifen for his selfless attitude even in the presence of something precious, the knight feels utterly humiliated. Perhaps it is because he thinks he is being handed a victory that should not rightfully belong to him, which is clearly against his honor as a knight. As for our boy, he simply does not want the sword because it is just a second-rate toy compared to what he used to wield in his prime. While Altian is still feeling pissed and fuming, the party proceeds to head out of the place. After that little adventure, everyone finally comes back to Cattle Village, where the villagers are really blown away by the redhead's healing abilities. Riefenhart finds himself pretty intrigued to see the seemingly straightforward guy pitching in to help the villagers by healing the sick and handing out some cash. The only thing that pops into his mind is that the Phalanx Holy Order is going to get some serious PR mileage out of this femboy's generous acts. I guess this dude is more cunning than our hero gave him credit for. Anyway, after a while, all the knights start riding back home. Along the way, the knight tells his henchmen to keep a close eye on Rifen, to which Edward responds that he is already onto it since that guy definitely is not ordinary. And when we look at Altian's face, I nearly burst out laughing because this guy still wants to prove that he is stronger than our hero. Meanwhile, somewhere on the mountains, we find Riefenhart once again, and after filling his pockets to the brim, he decides to finally venture out on an adventure in the search of his pointy-eared woman. However, it appears that there is still one trouble that keeps following him around like a persistent bug. That's right, the femboy is unsurprisingly following our hero. After catching up to him, he asks Rifen if he knows about priests who serve the goddesses and believers alike. The hero responds with a yes, mentioning that those individuals are called pilgrims. And the funny part is, this feminine guy did not even consider that pilgrims often die while traveling. But still, he seems dead set on becoming a pilgrim, which is why he ditched his party as well. But he officially gets under our hero's skin when he expresses his desire about wanting to tag along with him. And the way he says it, Reifenhardt's got no doubt he swings both ways, just like Todd. At this point, Reifenhardt is itching to shake this dude off, but then he remembers that this guy is a priest, which makes him the ultimate first aid kit. So, he gives this redhead the green light to stick around or bug off, whichever floats his boat. After they officially became buddies on this journey, the redhead expresses his desire to make some killer abs. So, he asks for the proper routine and training to get shredded. But the boy responds that getting beaten to death and lifting boulders is all there is to it. As our hero keeps remembering his girlfriend Cirrus on his way, the scene transitions to the outside of a large mansion. Inside, a man with a purple head can be seen, who is really frustrated over his butler. And as he continues his tirade, we learn that the elf woman this butler brought is not letting this guy near her, which is really flipping him out. By the way, this man is the heir of the Karen trade union, known as Beret. He asks why this elf is so damn resistant to serving him in bed, to which the elf responds that she is just born that way. Purplehead not only hates her attitude but also her eyes, and she once again just ticks him off by telling him she was just born with those eyes. While the other ladies around him try to calm him down, he tells his butler to send this woman back because, even if he got her for a steal, he is not about to settle for a lemon. Looks like this girl, currently being known as number 148, is considered as a defective product. Inside the Chatten Principality's elf slave market, known as Elfenheim, the girl was already returned by all three of her owners, who all failed to lay hands on her body. Basically, the Chatten Principality is a bustling commerce hub in the north. It borders a bunch of other nations, and trade flourishes here, which is all thanks to a massive river cutting right across it. Feel free to pause the video to take a closer look at the map layout and understand the territory better. Right now, we have arrived in Zeppelin, the capital of this nation and the center of all commerce. In the bustling streets of Zeppelin, we spot our duo of adventurers, really taken aback by the crowded streets. But I guess they are not too surprised, considering this is the bustling heart of commerce in the continent. This nation was literally built by merchants who bought land from the Grain Kingdom, and there are plenty of perks for merchants here. Not to mention, the people in this place are all money-driven. And for some reason, our hero is pretty sure he is going to find Cirrus here, the elven love of his past life. Just as he is strolling along, his attention is snagged by a commotion nearby. There is a noble going absolutely ballistic on this poor dwarf, and this fat fuck appears to be Rolofane Trade Union head, who goes by the name Tarek. After giving the poor old man a royal beatdown, he tosses 30 gold coins his way for compensation. And once the rich guy and his entourage leave, the saint rushes over to the injured old man to tend to his wounds. As soon as the guy gets patched up, the redhead decides to report the noble fat fuck to the cops. But his anger quickly turns to confusion when the greedy old dwarf he just helped completely brushes off the matter, saying that as long as he's got money, he is golden. Looks like the reality has finally hit our little priest, which is the fact that cold and hard cash is the only real power and concern in this city. In fact, the femboy is losing his marbles, seeing that our hero's take on these people was spot on. Just as they watch this greedy guy happily depart with the money, Reifenhardt further educates the clueless lad that here, punishment for breaking the law can be paid off with a fat stack of cash, so nobody ever sees the inside of the cell. Looks like being a new adventurer just taught our redhead a whole new side of the world. When Reifenhardt is questioned about the reason for his visit to this trash place, the man simply says he is here to shop. But when pressed on what exactly he is shopping for, the dude starts sweating bullets, before blurting out that he is here to buy an elf. Needless to say, the saint is totally freaked out. But before things get out of hand, the boy clarifies he is not here to get freaky with someone in bed, but he cannot reveal anything about his real mission either. Upon hearing this, the saint just turns away with his face twisted in disgust, probably wondering how all men are nothing but lustful animals. I guess he doesn't quite trust our boy's words. Anyways, Reifenhardt reminds the little fool that he's also a man himself, to which the redhead reluctantly concedes. The next scene takes us to another part of town, where we run into Tarek once again. Just as the fatty is laughing about the Rolofane Trade Union's cheap business tactics to take control of the market, someone catches his attention. It's the same purple head who has not had much luck with the ladies. The fat guy, with a big smug grin, tries to shoot the breeze with the purple head, but it's clear that Beret would rather avoid engaging in conversation with him. Nonetheless, he strikes up a conversation by mentioning that the slave he bought a while ago wasn't complying to his commands, so he simply returned her about 2 weeks ago. Upon hearing this, the chubster laughs his ass off, mocking Beret for not even being able to handle a single slave. He goes on to insult him, saying it's no wonder why the Karen Company cannot get into the top 10 trade unions. But to his defense, Beret explains that the elf was a defective piece, who was already returned many times by other owners as well. Instead of understanding Purplehead's point, the fat guy starts thinking about taking that particular slave for himself. And by doing that, he wants to humiliate Beret by successfully taming the elf that he failed to handle. The next scene takes us to one of the hotels, where the first thing we see is our hero's bewildered face. The cause of his bewilderment becomes clear when we see the saint's scrawny body, which is barely thicker than a straw. It is really creeping our boy out, especially after watching this guy struggle to perform a single push-up. At this point, he is also really confused about why this boy is not gaining any muscle despite all his efforts. Nevertheless, he instructs him not to push himself too hard, as he cannot afford to have him slowing down their journey due to muscle cramps. But the hero finds himself bewildered once again when the saint's magical aura lights up his face. The redhead looks as fresh as a cucumber after using a healing charm on himself. Well then, it seems Reifenhardt has finally figured out why this idiot isn't gaining any muscles. Apparently, healing magic works similarly to turning back time. Muscles are built by tearing the muscle fibers during a workout, and then giving them time to regenerate. By repeating this process, anyone can get some fats gains if they put in enough effort. However, since the priest boy uses a spell to heal himself after each workout, his muscles just revert to their original state every time. Realizing that this fool has been wasting his time for the past several years, my guy is literally at a loss for words on how to respond to this shit. But just when the saint asks if there's something wrong, Reifenhardt disappointingly responds with a nod, but promises to teach him an effective training method later. The hero then asks the redhead whether he ever feels annoyed because of his long hair, but the boy just shrugs, mentioning that he cannot help it, since they just grow back really fast. In any case, our hero rolls his eyes at the weirdness of it all, and proceeds to head out to the slave auction as he had planned. Of course, the redhead also grabs his robe and decides to tag along. As they walk down, let me brief you about this whole slave auction thing. It's basically a place where various kinds of creatures are sold. But the most popular ones are of course the elves, and they tend to fetch higher prices because of their beauty among the other races of monsters. And in the realm of elves, it is the Slayer elves who fetch the highest prices, while regular female elves and young female elves are comparatively cheaper. On the other end of the spectrum, male elves, orc swordsmen, and orc slaves come with much lower price tags, with male elves often being at the bottom of the list due to their higher suicide rates. One reason for the high demand for elves is their long lifespan. However, this also means that their adolescent stages are prolonged, leading to a famously distasteful joke, that a foolish merchant might die of old age before seeing a return on their investment in a baby elf. Upon reaching the auction building, they both take a seat and wait. During the wait, the redhead comments that Elfheim is a specialized elf slave auction with a tradition spanning 300 years. Our hero finds it extremely sickening that they have dubbed a slave auction as Elfenheim, which basically means the paradise of the elves. In any case, the saint is particularly excited to see the auction for the first time in his life, and doesn't feel particularly bothered by the idea of slavery whatsoever. In fact, he holds the belief that elves are at least treated better than orcs. Of course, Reifenhardt is the only anomaly among humans who thinks otherwise, and remains steadfast in his conviction that slavery is slavery, no matter how decide to spin it. To this, the saint tries to double down on his statement by reminding our hero that living under the care of humans is still preferable than living in some deadly barren land. And in the company of humans, basic necessities like food and shelter are guaranteed for survival. It's a bit sad to think that the priest, along with all other humans, seem to think as if every other race is dependent on them for their survival, when they're the ones who ended up enslaving them in the first place. And since Reifenhardt knows that he cannot simply change other people's narrow-minded thinking, he plans to establish yet another empire, which will be different from the one he set up in his past life. This time, it will not be some kind of dark empire of the Demon King, but a properly recognized nation of otherworldly beings. Anyway, while they were having this small talk, the auctioneer finally saunters in with the ladies, and before diving into presenting the elves, he makes sure to throw out a quick apology for keeping our hero waiting. As soon as these lovely ladies strut onto the scene, each one of them seems to be turning on the charm. But as you can imagine, Reifenhardt is not interested in any of them. Meanwhile, the idiot saint is just feeling embarrassed to see these ladies, while the auctioneer mistakes the boy for a girl because of his pretty face, and wonders who on earth brings a girl to a joint like this. After feeling disappointed to see the elves, who were supposed to be the descendants of the great spirits, but are now reduced to positions as prostitutes, our hero specifically asks if there are any slayers with darker skin tones. Of course, the idiot gets a major side-eye from our little redhead, especially because he was just yapping about how slavery is all bad and stuff. The merchant simply states that he can arrange for a darker-skinned woman if that is what he prefers, although there is only one available. They start strolling across the building, and on the way, the merchant starts babbling about how they make sure the elves get their exercise, as well as fresh vegetables, fruits, and nuts. He seems extremely proud, only until Reifenhardt shoots him a glare that could melt glaciers, basically telling him to cut the crap and just take them to the elf. Seeing our hero's fierce look, the auctioneer immediately looks away and shuts his trap. Upon arriving at the main entrance, the merchant informs the guard that he is here to see number 148. After receiving the pass to enter, they encounter the elves who are candidates to become slayers, and they are being trained here to become full-fledged warriors. As soon as our hero's eyes fall upon what he had been longing to see for so long, tears start to flow unconditionally. Right before him stands his love, Cirrus. Of course, she's nowhere near her prime self right now. But before we can witness their warm reunion, the scene cuts back to one of his memories. There, Reifenhart can be seen with Cirrus, probably attempting alchemy. Just as she warns him not to mix certain potions, it is too late, and a giant explosion rocks the entire castle. It appears this is not the first time our guy had done something similar. But nonetheless, as she gets too close to him to pick him back up, Cirrus starts to wonder why she feels so strongly for him despite his old age. That is when Reifenhart tells her to just never use honorifics when calling him, but the lady politely declines his request. When he asks for the reason behind it, she simply smiles, and the scene takes us to the moment when the entire empire was in flames. The mage watches his empire turn to ashes before his eyes, and the four heavenly kings do not seem to be enjoying the spectacle either. With their defeated faces, they have come here to bid a final farewell to their king before making their escape. However, the old man tells them to stop sulking, reminding them that being warriors, they should not be terrified of anything that might shake their confidence. He then reveals that the entire continent has gathered their forces, amounting to 2 million soldiers who have come to take down the supposed demon king. It is hilarious for Reifenhart that these foolish humans are ready to blaze and ruin their own countries just to win this single war. In any case, since their fate is pretty much sealed, the orc asks if their majesty will not be joining them in fleeing this mess, to which Reifenhart responds that the rest of them can only escape if he stays here instead. The mage also apologizes to the dwarf for letting him down and bankrupting the entire nation, even though he had the dwarven god's guarantee. But the dwarf insists that it was never a guarantee, but just an oracle from their people. Reifenhart, however, stresses that it is the same damn thing regardless. Looks like the oracle was some kind of message for the dwarves that there would be a man with an elf and an orc by his side, who would tear down the pillar of Hawkrol. The dwarves were instructed to follow this person, because he would change their fate and bring them salvation. Although our hero did lead the dwarves to salvation, he did not imagine he would also cause their downfall as well. Whatever the case, before finally saying goodbye, he prays to God that they will reunite someday. With that, the heavenly kings start to leave. But the elf lady hesitates and asks him to promise that he will come back to her. To reassure her, my guy starts rambling about fate and all that jazz, but it's quite clear that these are not the words she wants to hear. So, she leans in and yells right in his face that he is definitely coming back. Seeing the affection in her eyes, the hero gives her a warm hug. This would be the last time in that life that they were able to share each other's warmth. And now, back in the current life, it appears that the gods have finally given him a chance to hug her once again. Just as Cirrus is struggling, the merchant reveals that she is apparently a defective product lacking basic manners. This has led to her being returned 3 times already. Although she might have the skills, her personality is so horrible that it has been nearly impossible to sell her. As a result, she ended up here for training to become a slayer. After all, before any elf can qualify for the slayer title, they must have first-hand experience in killing other living beings. But despite everything the merchant mentioned about her flaws, Reifenhart is wholeheartedly willing to buy her. When we take a look into the merchant's greedy head, we learn that he planned to sell her for next to nothing. But after seeing our hero's unique taste in women, he decides to jack up the price by another 100. And so, after discussing this cheap tactic to himself, he shamelessly demands a total of 300 gold coins. Much to our surprise, the saint is quite shocked to hear this, because to him, even 300 coins seem incredibly cheap. However, the merchant simply attributes her low price to her twisted personality. In any case, this is how Cirrus, the dark elf, came under the ownership of our hero. Seeing her all bruised up really hurts Reifenhart's heart. Unable to stand it, he takes off his rather expensive coat. But before he hands this coat to the elf, the merchant immediately notices the gesture and asks to call for a priest to treat the girl's injuries. Of course, Reifenhart declines and assigns the redhead for the healing job instead. After draping his coat over the elf, he decides on a suitable name for her, because the girl is currently unnamed. As you can imagine, he tells her that she will be called Cirrus from now on, to which she responds positively. After confirming her reaction, he then also goes as far as to give her the surname of Valentia. Naturally, the curious elf asks why she would need a surname as a slave. She wonders if it's a name that belongs to his family. But Reifenhart responds with a no, mentioning that it is a surname which will solely belong to herself from now on. After that much is cleared, he also introduces himself and his friend Cillian, who is a priest of the Church of Philanance. Once again, the girl nods positively. After a while, when our crew had left the auction house, that same old greedy merchant gets approached by a customer who is asking about the slave number 148. Not surprisingly, this customer appears to be the same chubby guy from before, who planned to buy the elf that Beret had failed to tame. But when he learns that she was sold just an hour ago, his face loses all complexion. He then goes all tomato red like some angry baboon, and wonders if Beret caught wind of his plan and bought the slave back. Of course, the merchant reveals immediately that the person who bought the slave was a young man he had never seen before. The noble asks about the guy's name, but the greedy merchant has no clue since he never bothered to ask. All that mattered to him was getting his money in cash. On the other hand, our hero is also interrogating Cirrus about someone, while the author decides to throw in a side shot of her ass in those short jeans. And let me tell you, she's finally starting to resemble the absolute beauty that Reifenhart knew her for in his past life. It seems our hero likes her in this outfit as well, so he decides to buy it for her immediately. After they finish shopping, the boy asks if she would like to eat anything, but she just says she'll simply do as her master instructs. Hearing her call him master over and over makes Reifenhart quite uncomfortable, so he tells her to stop addressing him as such. Sadly, the girl ends up him even more uncomfortable by asking if he plans to return her as well. Well, when we take a look into her mind, she's just totally thrown for a loop by how this guy is trying to treat a slave as if she's another human. She knows for a fact that humans despise all other species except their own, and it explains a lot about her generally grumpy attitude. Meanwhile, Reifenhart gently insists once again, expressing his desire for her to see him as nothing more than a friend and companion on their journey. Not to mention, being called master just makes him feel awkward. It seems this girl is just way too suspicious of humans, and she starts to think that perhaps her new master has a different kind of roleplay kink than the others. She decides to play along with it for now by agreeing not to call him master and opting to call him Sir Reifenhart instead. After a while, the party finally hits up one of the restaurants. And even with all the tasty grub laid out before her, she's still not budging on her opinion of humans. While chowing down, Reifenhart brings up the restaurant's name, which honors the goddess Redanti, known for her generosity and all that good harvest stuff. It seems that the owner of this restaurant thinks that serving food is like a form of worship to her. After hearing this, the redhead comments that if they truly believe that, then they should be feeding people for free. Reifenhart then reminds him about his own religion, which is Philanance, the same religion which rakes in cash from the beauty business and charge absurd fees for their services. Of course, the saint tries to justify it, saying since they worship the goddess of beauty and love, and there's nothing wrong with using that to earn their money. Thankfully, he goes silent after realizing that he's probably just being a hypocrite. Meanwhile, our hero glances over at the elf, who seems to be really digging into her meal. But she jumps a bit when she catches Reifenhart shamelessly staring at her. So, she keeps up her nonchalant act, like an ungrateful kid on Christmas. Seeing her like this, the boy wonders if she did not like the food either, even though this is the same place he used to take her on all their dates before. He then reflects on his past life, realizing that instead of meeting her as her savior, he is more like a buyer to her right now. There's a part of him that's also worried that perhaps he has met her too soon. But whatever the case, he is not sweating it. He was finally able to reunite with her, and that's all that matters. Also, he's pretty confident that she'll open up to him eventually. Once they stop at one of the weapon stalls, the sweet elf lady gets herself a rather sharp sword. But when Reifenhart sees her holding onto a rapier, he asks her if she did not usually use a scimitar instead. I guess he spoke way too much, and Cirrus is gritting her teeth at the sight of this bastard who is actually telling the truth. But the saint unintentionally saves his butt by complimenting how a great martial artist can tell about a person's choice of weapon just by looking at their hands. It seems the redhead scored himself a mithril-based weapon too, and it is his first time owning one. Looks like Reifenhart isn't really surprised to hear this, since priests do not usually hang around with blades tucked inside their asses. Suddenly, the boy notices someone over his right shoulder, who are giving him uncomfortable glares from afar. As the scene zooms out, we see this entourage who seem to want a few minutes of our hero's time. So naturally, Reifenhart turns toward them and asks with confidence what they want, to which the soldier does not beat around the bush before mentioning that someone from noble status wants that female elf. While Cirrus perks up at her mention, my man aggressively hovers over that puny bastard, asking if there is any more he wants to say. That is when the soldier presents this sealed envelope to our hero and tells him to sell that slave to him. As for compensation, they are willing to offer a reasonable price for her, and he can also exchange her for another slayer if he wants to. After Reifenhart simply tells him that he is not interested, that is when this soldier tries to intimidate the boy by his words, asking him if he actually understands the situation. But my man is sticking to his guns, repeating what he has already made crystal clear. After seeing that they are not getting anywhere with our hero, they decide to head back for now. And surprisingly enough, they just leave the party alone without forcing them or putting up a fight, like we usually see in comics. Even the saint finds their behavior to be quite weird. The night finally descends, and we find ourselves outside this familiar mansion once again. Inside, we meet Tarek once again as well, who appears to be absolutely livid at his loyal guard, known as Ramad, who came back empty-handed. However, Ramad tries to calm his angry boss down, explaining that the owner was not willing to give up on that slave. So, he did not resort to violence as he did not want to attract any unnecessary attention in the middle of the street. You see, Ramit is a perceptive guy who reassures his boss by laying out a plan. He will keep an eye out for the perfect opportunity to snatch that elf woman. And once he has got her, he will spin some story about her dying and offer to pay double her own or double the original price, as this seems like the most effective way to handle things. After hearing this scheme, the big guy is totally on board with this plan. He then tells the soldier to also take Sir Lantas along with him this time, since that dude finally needs to start earning his keep. Soon enough, the next morning rolls around, and the first thing we see is a fat stack of gold coins, which obviously belongs to our hero. Turns out, he had about 2,000 gold coins stashed away, originally meant to snag Cirrus if things didn't go according to plan. But since that didn't happen, he's got plenty of cash left over. Sounds like a lot, but in the grand scheme of his empire rebuilding plans, this much is just a drop in the bucket. But building a kingdom is for later. Right now, he is trying to figure out how to invest these coins rather than just carrying around their weight, and that's when a memory from his past comes flooding back. He recalls the devastating famine that struck Kraven's kingdom, along with its neighboring kingdom around this time. The important thing to note is that the Kraven's kingdom is all about agriculture. They worship the goddess of harvest, known as Redanti, and their lands are usually bursting with crops in every season. So, nobody ever really thought about preparing for a famine. But then, a real famine strikes out of nowhere, and starvation hits hard, which was extreme to the point that the parents were forced to eat their own children to survive. While keeping that horrific incident in mind, our guy decides that it is time to invest in grains before scarcity strikes. As such, he starts weighing his options for trade unions, making sure that he steers clear of the Rolafane trade union, no matter what. The leader of that union was a creep who mistreated Cirrus in his past life, and there is no way he is getting involved with them for business. So, it is now down to Karen and Taubin. After some thought, he decides to throw his support behind Taubin, the third largest trade union on the continent, specializing in grain trading and giving Rolafane a run for their money. Inside Taubin's headquarters, we meet Civil Taubin, the leader of the company. The poor guy seems stressed out because their rival company, Rolafane, is undercutting them big time, just by selling wheat at dirt cheap prices and causing them lose valuable partners. And just as he's fretting about his drowning business, his assistant interrupts him, saying there is an investor who wants to make some investments. But Taubin frustratingly tells his assistant to shoo away the man since he is not in the mood for paperwork. Not to mention, petty amounts will not solve the big problem he's facing. However, Taubin is forced to bite his tongue when he hears that the client wants to invest nearly 1,500 gold coins. And yep, you guessed it, the client is our hero, rocking a big grin as he puts up 3 bags full of gold coins on the table. The bewildered Civil Taubin gets even more confused when Reifenhardt mentions he is investing all 1,500 coins into grain, targeting the Kraven's kingdom for the barley harvest next spring. The guild leader tries to knock some sense into him, pointing out that selling grain to Kravens is like selling soap to the orcs, because it just does not make sense given their fertile lands. But Reifenhardt counters this statement, saying that even orcs would get used to soap if they tried it. On a serious note, he adds that if his investment fails, he will be the only one to bear the loss. But if it succeeds, both parties will profit. Despite this win-win scenario, Taubin hesitates. He cannot in good conscience recommend an investment that seems destined to fail for his client. However, he quickly agrees to the deal when Reifenhardt pushes his buttons by threatening to take his investment to a competitor instead. Realizing the dire state of his union, the leader confesses that they are struggling, and this money could be their lifeline out of hard times. Despite this, he remains firm on his stance against investing in grain. Knowing Taubin's stubbornness from his previous life, our hero decides to make things crystal clear. He insists that it's his money and he will decide how to use it, so he demands this guy to hurry up and prepare the contract. With a glare that could send shivers down anyone's spine, Reifenhardt makes it abundantly clear that his money better not be misused for personal gain, to which Taubin manages to stammer out a positive response. As the guild master gets busy preparing the documents, our hero inquires about their branch in Grain Kingdom. Taubin confirms that they have recently established themselves in the northern region. With this in mind, Reifenhardt asks if they have any branches near Delphia's Mage Tower, to which the man replies that they do not have a branch right next to the tower, but there is another branch in the town of Ronta, which one must pass through Delphia to reach. Seizing the opportunity, Reifenhardt requests that Taubin investigate someone for him inside the Delphia Tower. Of course, the guild master agrees to contact the Ronta branch right away. We all know that Reifenhardt is simply trying to gather information about his younger self, who should currently be studying magic in Delphia. The next scene takes us to the ladies, or well, one lady and the other pretty close to being a lady. Anyway, we see Cirrus in action, swinging her dagger with such precision and speed that it is like watching a blur of movement. By now, you can tell that she's a fighter to her core. Then, we are taken back in time through Cirrus's memories, where we see her mother imparting wisdom to her daughter. teaching her about the elves' ancient role as guardians of the forest, and how they lived in eternal happiness under the protection of the world tree, known as Elfenheim. Every animal was their friend, and the trees provided endless fruit for their nourishment. Despite the current struggles of the elves against humans, the elder elf, Eldia, believes that they will find their way back to paradise once again. As the young girl sees her town burning before her eyes, her mother's advice echoes in her mind. She remembers that they are descendants of the Great Fairy and must not forget their pride, even in the face of difficulties. After her town was razed to the ground, Cirrus found herself sold off to a seemingly good place, purely because of her looks. However, she quickly learned that survival in the human world required loyalty and cunning, and she was not cut out for such submission. So, from a very young age, she endured beatings and starvation, even facing ridicule from her own kind, the elves, for being a pure-blooded high elf. But what kept her going was the memory of the adults she admired, all of whom wielded swords and fought bravely. They died with dignity, and she found solace in the sword, a symbol of courage and strength. Despite the passing of time and the fading of memories, she clung to her mother's words, a reminder to never forget their pride. After seeing Cirrus's impressive display of swordsmanship, the saint begins applauding loudly, expressing admiration for her skills and expressing a desire to learn from her. But Cirrus simply replies that giving it your all is all there is to it. The saint finds this response frustratingly vague, wondering if everyone in the martial arts world communicates in such cryptic ways, because this is what our hero says all the time to him as well. Then, the saint starts swinging his fists, asking if he's not trying hard enough already. Before Cirrus can respond, a familiar voice grabs their attention. It is the same group of goons who had previously come to take Cirrus away, and this time, they seem determined not to leave empty-handed. The little one boldly tells those guys to get the fuck out of there, but the thugs let the saint know they're not going anywhere unless they snag what they came for. Just as the priest insists again for them to get the hell out, one of the thugs gets annoyed and carelessly swings his sword to smash the poor guy down. Thankfully, the blow is instantly blocked by Cirrus, and in the very next moment, the thug finds his throat slit. As the other goons lunge at her after seeing their friend's fate, they quickly meet the same end with throat-slitting blows from the young elf. The master of these goons can do nothing but remain frozen in terror, watching his friends drop dead like flies. That's when the idiot saint tries to butt in with his fancy pinky powers. But when a sword passes before his eyes with a margin of mere centimeters, it hits the wall behind him and gets thrust inside the rock-solid wall due to the precision and speed. He's shaking in his boots at this point, realizing that if Cirrus had not pulled him out, he would have actually fucking died. The elf then tells him to take a chill pill and stand back so he's not a hindrance. With those words, she starts sauntering towards the thug, juggling her dagger in her hand like it's nobody's business. With her stance clear, she challenges those pesky flies to come at her. Of course, seeing her exude such confidence really gets under this man's nerves. But it appears that this guy came prepared with a warrior orc in his company, which is definitely not the news our ladies wish to hear. With the order clear, the orc, named Takata, complies, vowing to honor his master's command and catch the elf at any cost. In his own language, the orc apologizes to the elf, mentioning that this is their fate and there is nothing anyone can do about it. Although, in his mind, he is pretty sure he is going to have a hard time fighting that elf since her abilities seem to be off the charts. In any case, with the final command of his master, the orc starts sprinting with the sword in hand. Just when the girl is trying to parry the attack from the front, the orc surprises her by attacking her from behind. Still, she somehow manages to evade the blow after getting her clothes torn. Despite her enemy being strong, she clenches her jaw and swings her dagger, while beating herself up for not bringing her scimitar that she's used to. Anyway, just as the dagger was nearing the orc's throat, he easily forces her to jump into the air. On the other hand, the thug seems frustrated to see how this giant guy cannot even catch a single female elf. Well, it's not that the orc is not doing his best. And since he knows he's going to fail this mission and let his master down, he is pretty sure he'll be forced to starve tonight as well. As you can see, this green fella is giving everything he's got, and even the ground beneath him is shattering upon the impact of his footsteps. Yet, despite his relentless efforts, he struggles to gain the upper hand against Cirrus. As the orc charges forward once more with his massive sword, Cirrus does the unexpected and charges right at him. Of course, this sudden move surely throws the orc off guard, who is confused as to why she's charging towards him. Nevertheless, he swings his sword, aiming to strike her down. But just as it seems he's about to land a fatal blow, he locks eyes with her, leaving him feeling terrified once again, wondering why she's not trying to dodge the attack. For some odd reason, the orc ends up changing his sword's trajectory, which gives Cirrus the opportunity she had been waiting for, and effortlessly moves in and slits the orc's throat without an ounce of doubt or hesitation. Getting back into the action, we see that even after taking a direct hit to his throat, the orc is more shocked by Cirrus's reckless decision to not dodge his attack. He is certain that if he had not changed the direction of his sword, she would have been dead already. But when we look at Ciri's face, it is as if she knew this was going to happen from the start. Suddenly, the saint calls out to the girl, asking if she can block flying daggers, to which she vaguely responds in the affirmation. With that in mind, the saint starts conjuring up his pinky powers once again. However, the thug standing beside him tries to disrupt Femboy's plans by throwing a dagger towards them. But Ciri immediately goes on high alert and expertly parries the incoming blow which was aimed at them. Just as the saint finishes summoning forth these weird-ass maces adorned with creepy sculptures of undead creatures, he commands these things to beat the crap out of the thugs standing nearby. Everyone in the vicinity is utterly terrified, shocked to see something this out of whack, and the thug, in particular, is terrified out of his mind. I mean, after all, those giant maces are just about to smash all of these hobos who are trying to bully our pretty party. And smash they do, the entire area rocks out with the resounding bang of those mace crashes. Even those cute little birds are caught off guard. After rocking the entire place with a bang, the idiot starts running down frantically, telling the elf to run while they can because his divine powers only work properly on undead creatures. But Ciri just grabs the idiot from his shirt and immediately flings her sword, embedding it right into the wall. She uses the sword as a ladder to jump even higher above, and immediately jumps inside the building on the last floor through the window. Meanwhile, on the ground, the other goons are still scattered like injured lambs, and the master immediately orders the orc to chase our ladies down. But then, a cocky guy shows up, mocking the loser for not catching a little elf even with someone as formidable as Takata by his side. I guess this is the same guy who is known as Sir Lantas, that the fat noble Tarek recommended to this thug to ensure he does not come back without our elf lady. In any case, the old man decides to flex his muscles by taking the job, since he does not have much to do lately. And as soon as he finds out she went through that window, he vanishes from his spot. In the next moment, he is soaring through the air and directly enters the broken window, leaving the cocky thug behind, who is trying to figure out how the hell that man just jumped that high just in one swoop. Well, as you might have already guessed, the secret behind this man's agility is that he is an aura user. Although he reached the last floor in an instant, it appears he is still late, but he is not complaining since he loves a good game of hide and seek. As they sprint down the corridor, we learn they're rushing back to their room to get equipped. Ciri is still worried there might already be people waiting for them, but the redhead suggests that even if they have to fight a couple of people, it's still better than running around unarmed. Hearing this, the girl finds herself bewildered that this guy, who looks dumb on the outside, actually understands how to deal with the harsh realities of the world quite well. As they reach their dormitory rooms, they spot a man guarding the door just as they had expected. But Ciri immediately leaps into the air and gives a brutal smack right over the bastard's face before he can even process what the hell is happening. While the elf lady is dressing herself frantically, the redhead startles her further by screaming, telling her to just grab the stuff and run out of the joint before someone catches up to them. But before leaving the room, the saint immediately casts his spell to remove all traces they might have left behind. Meanwhile, the old man saunters down the corridor like he owns the place, radiating a menace aura without breaking a sweat. Apparently, Lantas is a seasoned swordsman who has reached the pinnacle of swordsmanship, has awakened his aura. An aura user like him can vividly sense the movements of all living beings within a 30-meter radius as if seeing them with their own eyes. Upon reaching the room where our party was staying, Lantas is annoyed to discover that these lowly creatures had the skills to erase their presence. Fuming at the thought of the two brats slipping through his grasp, he is interrupted by the thug, who arrives totally out of breath after sprinting to the top floor. With exhaustion written all over his face, the thug anxiously asks if the kids ran away. In response, the old man tells him to shut up in a rather polite tone, and then orders him to release the hound, as he has a hunch that they have not gone too far. The next scene finally reveals our two little fugitives, looking really adorable with their anxious faces and covered in hoodies from top to bottom. They are sneakily running around because if any other people catch wind that there are slaves who have run away, everyone will turn against them. Just after catching a glimpse of this side of the world, the little redhead finally understands why pilgrims are always dropping dead on their journeys. He also appears to be really terrified of getting caught by some women we still do not have any clue about. Worst of all, he definitely does not want to go back to that woman with his frail body. I am not sure what is up with that woman he is terrified of, but he is desperate to find Reifenhart to get out of this mess. While running, he activates one of his magic spells, and these pink ropes start swirling around the area, leading the way to our hero. It seems this idiot used a spell meant to turn chance encounters into destiny, typically used to reunite lovers against all odds. I guess desperate times require desperate measures, so he had no choice but to use it. As they catch their breath, the saint compliments Ciri, expressing that she is probably the only person who seems to be this strong so far. To his response, the girl has the same admiration for him, noting how this femboy is already a high-ranking cleric despite his young age. During their brief conversation, the redhead finds himself fascinated by how talking to Ciri does not feel like she is a slave at all, but rather someone special. Upon reaching their destination guided by the Destiny charm, they are utterly shocked by what they see. And as expected, the aura user has already caught up to them. As soon as the elf sees the bastard grinning with pure evil intentions, she tells the redhead to stand back. The man then begins to stroll forward, warning them that running would be futile. However, neither of them had even considered running in the first place. In fact, the elf charges straight toward the bastard, knowing that if they were to run, they might get caught off guard. As soon as she tries to land her first hit, it is swiftly parried by the man, who then devilishly leans in close to her ear, exposing her for being unusually talented. Cirrus swings her sword again, but the guy moves around like he is Dr. Paradox right out of Ben 10. And by now, he has started to get under her nerves, especially for treating her like a child in the fight and exposing her every move as if he is seeing right through her. That is when the femboy starts chanting his pinky powers once again. This time, he boosts girl's strength and courage, which is precisely what she needed to face this formidable opponent. As the pink light lights up the whole place, Lantis also finds himself pretty surprised to see these fancy sacred spells being thrown around like nobody's business. And he has also started to think this guy might be at bishop level or even better. It appears his guess is not too far off, because that little dude is practically dancing with joy, while claiming his social status which he has earned in the south of Vasily. So, he cheers on Cirrus to take that bastard down, and of course, she is all in. As soon as she begins to swing her sword left and right with her newfound powers, the man starts to take steps back, clearly feeling the pressure. However, in the midst of battle, one of the contestants' swords shatters, and not surprisingly, it is Cirrus who loses her sword. With her final defense gone, she is left vulnerable to the man's merciless attack. In the next moment, she is slashed down by him, which leaves blood gushing out from her wounds. According to this dipshit, this blow serves as a warning that if he was playing along before, it does not mean he will tolerate these insolent brats getting too full of themselves. The once happy face immediately becomes the canvas of despair when Saint sees her getting cut down like cucumber. And the bastard who cut her down did not even break sweat and just casually putting his sword back into the scabbard in just a most casual way. The saint immediately rushes back to Cirrus, utterly blown away by the realization that a monster like this would bother wandering around in a place like this. After all, an aura user could live in luxury no matter where they go, and employing one just to catch an elf slave is like using a dragon to light a stove. Other partners in crime arrive on the scene, and as soon as the redhead hears them calling out to this man with the name Lantis, he immediately recognizes the bastard. Apparently, this guy who is known as Lantis von Kalpenarda is not your average Joe or Alex. He is a big deal in the Taken Kingdom, a renowned knight from a noble family with some serious martial skills. He awakened his aura in his late 30s, and all of the Taken Kingdom rejoiced at the birth of a new aura user. However, Lantis had a hideous secret, or you can also call it a really fucking bad fetish, one I could not even share with you guys. But I am pretty sure his fetish was not as repulsive as people who like feet. Anyway, he started with elf slaves and eventually moved on to humans in the royal city, even getting his hands dirty with nobles. And that is how his fetish led him to being the biggest disgrace the Taken Kingdom ever saw. In the present moment, the saint is seriously freaked out to see this bastard standing before him, because he never expected a monster like Lantis to be roaming around the Principality of Chatten. But this disgusting, sadistic old man just smirks and says he is here to earn some bread, nothing more, nothing less. He casually reveals that he has already killed hundreds in the Taken Kingdom and has been drifting from place to place lately. Just when we peek into the lackey's thoughts, we learn that these guys are leveraging Lantis' skills to their advantage for the Rolafane trade union, and it seems to be working like a charm. Apparently, after employing this old man as a salaried enforcer, they assign him all sorts of dirty work, making it a win-win situation for both parties, because in return, this man gets to roam around freely however he pleases. You see, an aura user symbolizes the pinnacle of power in this world, and the Rolafane trade union skyrocketed to become the second largest trading company in the Principality of Chatten in just 10 years, which is all thanks to Lantis. In the next moment, the old coot raises his hand and shoots pressure bullets from his fingers, leaving the little one struggling on the ground. Just as Lantis is having fun toying with the kids, the lackey behind him reminds him that Master Tarek might get angry if he continues injuring the elf. And so, they decide to take their leave to present the bounty to their master. But before they go, this perverted old man also suggests taking the redhead along since he finds him quite attractive. Needless to say, the idiot is utterly creeped out by the old man's dirty talk, and wastes no time confirming that he is just a male. Unfortunately, this only excites Lantis further, who looks forward to having a new kind of experience he has never had before. Just as the lackey's hand hovers ominously close to the saint's head, Redhead immediately retaliates with his dagger and manages to sever the lackey's hand. This unexpected move throws this arrogant old man for a loop, as the bullets he shot at the saint a moment ago were supposed to sever his tendons, which would have left him immobile. Though Lantis admires the saint's tenacity and handsome face, he's still planning to amputate his limbs, just so he stops buzzing around anymore. However, before Lantis and his lackeys can act on their twisted thoughts, a meteor-like object crashes to the ground, leaving everyone startled. But unlike the others, the redhead is not fazed. In fact, his face lights up with hope. because, as you can see, their savior has finally crashed the party, and he seems seriously eager to confront the person responsible for harming his dear Cirrus. After making his bombastic grand entrance, Reifenhardt dramatically takes off his fancy, expensive coat while striding forward. As the coat is out from the body, revealing his muscular frame with bulging veins, Lantis immediately realizes this is no ordinary young gun, and the sense of dread he is exuding is off the charts. And when he learns that this formidable figure is the owner of the elf, the old man simply asks his lackey if he is actually sure that this man is just a random young kid, because the person he is sensing before his eyes is on a whole other level, and the mere presence of our hero is sending chills down his spine. Furthermore, since this old man cannot gauge our hero's skill level, it only checks the box that this person may be another aura user. However, if he is one, it does not make sense to Lantis why he is so young. Then again, he assumes our hero might be in his 30s, despite looking much younger outwardly. With that confidence in mind, he starts to walk toward our hero, commenting on how it has been a while since he met someone as strong. With just a sneer, my man shuts down that bastard with a voice that practically screams dominance. He gives him a reality check that he is just some old pervy geezer and advises him to drop the nightly charade. And instead, he suggests they skip the nonsense to get straight to the point. In response, Lantis just proceeds to draw his sword without a shred of hesitation. And on the flip side, Reifenhardt also amps up his aura and launches himself straight at the guy, with his ablaze fist directed at his opponent. The old man readies his sword for defense, and almost instantly, both parties clash, leaving a freaking explosion behind, which obliterates the ground beneath them. After his first attack gets blocked, the behemoth gears up for another go, swinging his fist once more. But the old man just grins, like he has been waiting for this. And so, the back and forth of blows begins, and they are striking each other so fast that we can barely see them moving. While this pervert old man is loving every second of it, our hero looks totally annoyed, probably just wanting to wrap things up and bail from this dump of a place. Meanwhile, the lackeys watching from the sidelines decide that it is best to run before they end up crushed or sliced in the crossfire. Just as their fight continues above, the saint is diligently trying to heal up Cirrus. After finally witnessing Reifenhardt in action, it comes as a great shock to the lady that he is an aura user. Perhaps witnessing his skill in action might just be enough to change her opinion of him after all. Meanwhile, the once cocky old fighter starts to feel the sting of Reifenhardt's punches, realizing the hard way that our hero is far from inexperienced in the realm of aura awakening. So, he does what any guy feeling the pressure would do. He jumps back, and turns his sword into this crazy energy whip, flinging it around to try and tag the boy. But my man's got tricks up his sleeve, like this move he is about to pull out, which is called Key Bullet. On the other hand, watching our hero effortlessly play around with his aura leaves the old dude bewildered once again. By now, he has retracted his previous statement about Reifenhardt's age, considering the possibility that our hero either awakened his aura in his teens, or is simply over 40 with a deceivingly youthful face. Let us be real, both those possibilities are just lies this old man's telling himself because he does not want to admit our hero is a prodigy. Meanwhile, Reifenhardt's raging inside at the sight of this seemingly pervy old dude pulling off such skilled swordplay. But he is not just angry, he is downright furious, because nobody has the right to touch his girl, let alone harm her. So, his fire kicks up a notch out of sheer determination, and with a single swing, he dissolves those whips, leaving the old man sweating buckets, wondering how the heck this is even possible. Out of curiosity, Lantis asks our hero if he is Marshal King Gerard's disciple, but our hero decides to stay quiet. Just when the old man has finally taken over conversation with that one question alone, he tries to chat further, wondering why our hero is so fixated on some slave when he has clearly got strength to spare. But hearing this jerk call his woman a slave just pisses our Reifenhardt even more. And that is when he starts shouting, schooling this seemingly clueless guy that those slaves he is talking about have feelings and their own will to live. The old man's left speechless, probably after seeing the boy ticked off for no apparent reason. While Reifenhardt clenches his fists, he gives a proper peace of mind to this Lantis about equality and all that stuff. And with one punch, he knocks the pedestal out from under that old guy. However, Lantis quickly gets back in the game after gaining his balance, and starts swinging his sword whips, while mentioning that he cannot make heads or tails of what that kid just blabbered. I guess this old man's response is not really a shocker to our hero, since he has faced this same attitude from folks in his past life. The belief that anything other than humans is inferior runs so deep in mankind that he has yet to shake their belief, and for them, these otherworldly species are just soulless, despite seeing them laugh and cry. In the middle of exchanging blows, the boy starts up a conversation by asking Lantis about why humans see elves as slaves. In response, the man simply replies with the age-old excuse, which is that it is only natural for dominant species like humans to see those lowly creatures as slaves. But my man questions the validity of this foolish statement by asking why descendants of the great fairies could be considered lowly creatures. With his fist charged with fiery power, he drives home the point that if it were not for humans dominating the world, they would be the ones enslaved. Then, with those final words ringing in the air, he swings his devastating fist in order to hit the man's chest. But before the hit could land, the sucker just leaps back once again. But my man is not cutting this bastard any slack and rushes forward for another strike. Just as the hit is about to land, Lantis narrowly saves himself once again and asks if our hero seriously believes that humans and other species are equals. However, the blow, which was aimed straight for the old bastard, ends up shattering the ground. Those discriminatory remarks have finally pushed our hero's buttons. He launches another blow, but once again, the old coot dodges it just in the nick of time and retaliates back with his sword whip, unleashing a barrage of strikes. But Reifenhart just stands there, absorbing every hit like it is nothing, while his body is exposed but seemingly invincible. In the middle of taking those blows, our hero reflects on how with the slavery system deeply ingrained in the continent, even powerless and weak humans are forced into a life of half-slavery, which is what they call serfdom. To him, it is just the consequence of implementing a flawed ideology, and these foolish humans seem completely oblivious to it. Finally, Lantis takes a hit that knocks him for a loop, leaving drool dribbling down his mouth as he staggers backward. After hitting the nearby wall, he tries to stand up, only to find our hero looming menacingly above him, ready to deliver the final blow. With a final glance exchanged between them, my man lands a solid punch right into the old man's chest, which leaves blood spilling from his mouth with that single blow. But our hero is not done yet, because he keeps pushing this old fuck against the wall, applying relentless force until the bastard breaks through it, sending him flying further until he does not hit the next wall with a resounding thud. This last blow literally demolishes everything in its path, packed with all of Reifenhart's conviction and disdain for those who discriminate. Seeing our hero go to such lengths just for his beliefs, the only thing that comes to Cirrus's mind is that he might be insane or something. Initially, she thought he was just some stupid guy pretending to fight for her to win her over. But after hearing him talk about elves not being slaves and all that righteous stuff, and how he acknowledges their heritage as great fairies, she begins to question if she might have been wrong about him. However, given her stubborn nature, it is doubtful she will change her mind anytime soon. Anyway, as the old bastard is stuck inside the rubble, he starts begging Reifenhart for mercy, but the boy makes it clear that he has no interest in saving or forgiving a piece of swine like him. However, Lantis keeps insisting, swearing on his sword that he will reflect on his sins for the rest of his life and contribute to society. By now, Reifenhart can see that the man might be telling the truth, but he is not fully sold on yet. After all, these so-called holy men commit all sorts of evil deeds, only to seek absolution at the temple. So, he challenges Lantis, telling him that if he really wants to repent, he better turn himself in instead of hiding behind the temple's false redemption. Out of desperation, the old man immediately agrees, promising to follow Reifenhart's instructions if the boy does not stain his hands with his vile blood. But our hero makes it clear that his hands are already stained but, nonetheless, decides to put a little trust in the old man's claims. However, just when the Lantis starts to believe his life might turn around, Reifenhart cracks his fingers menacingly and delivers a devastating blow to the old man's head, who is still trapped under the rubble. And not surprisingly, this bold move completely catches both ladies off guard, who probably have yet to learn a lot about our hero's way of life. After all, this is Reifenhart's version of mercy, ensuring the ultimate repentance by ending the old man's life. After turning the surrounding area into rubble, they finally take a moment to catch their breaths. That is when Reifenhart finds himself relieved to see that Cirrus has completely healed and does not forget to give props to his ultimate first aid kit for the magnificent work. However, the little priest does not appreciate being objectified and demands an explanation for our hero's slip-up, but only to hear him nervously say it is nothing. Meanwhile, the little elf's cheeks turn tomato red as she politely asks about Reifenhart's well-being. I guess it is probably the first time she has spoken to him in such a tone, so it is not surprising that my guy is all riled up after getting recognized by her, and his weird reaction definitely makes her start to think once again that perhaps this guy is just a weirdo after all. Meanwhile, just as those thugs are sneakily trying to run away, my man catches them off guard and orders them to come to him, like he is some kind of dog tamer or something. Needless to say, those idiots are shaking in their boots. And when they hesitantly turn around with utterly terrified faces, our hero gives them the green light to run, but not without reminding them of the consequences of their wrong choice they are about to make. After that little threat, he proceeds to ask one out of many questions, which is who instigated them for this kidnapping. Of course, despite this thug's sweaty and terrified face, we can clearly see they are really hesitant to answer his question. Well, Reifenhart had already figured out that these guys would not spill anything that easily, but still, he decides to go easy on them by showing his own version of mercy. And let me tell you, the kind of mercy he is talking about is nothing short of torture. After summoning that giant club of his, the fucker devilishly laughs at their faces, before taking the entire party of thugs to the town. While those lackeys are getting acquainted with our hero and his trusty club, let us take a moment to appreciate this moonlit night. After giving those guys a well-deserved makeover, Reifenhart gives his question another shot, making it clear it is the last time he will be repeating himself. Not surprisingly, before he can even finish talking, those terrified, beaten-up fellas immediately point their fingers at Tarek, the fatso who runs the Rolefian trade union. They are so scared to the point that they verbally draw a map to his hideout, which is located on the southern outskirts of Zeppelin. Upon learning the name behind that mastermind, he has no doubt about it that this is the same person who abused Cirrus for 10 long years in his last life. Back then, when our hero wanted to take out that jerk after rescuing Cirrus from his tyranny, he was itching for revenge. But sadly, when he finally went to confront him, the bastard was already dead in his bed. Seeing our hero's totally enraged face, the lackey quickly catches on that he is definitely going out for their master. So, he gives the boy some straight-up advice, telling him flat out that he cannot take down that man that easily. You see, Tarek is a big shot who owns the second biggest trade union in the Chatan Principality, and you already knew that pretty well. So, if our hero plans to take that bastard down, he is basically making enemies with the entire Chatan, so he better have a plan to deal with the entire nation of merchants as well. Well, my guy is no stranger to this kind of danger, especially since he has got all the knowledge from his past life. As such, he already knows how he is gonna deal with that fat cat, and seeing our hero smirk is just really freaking out these lackeys. Before finally leaving the place, he reminds these idiots that he has fulfilled his side of promise as well by leaving them alive, and now it is up to them to decide what they are going to do in this cold night alone. While the three of them are totally undressed, the other two lackeys start clinging to their master to soak up some warmth from his naked body, which is definitely giving this guy the heebie-jeebies of his life. Anyway, we are back at that familiar mansion again, and it looks like this purple head guy, known as Beret, is tossing some sassy verbal jabs at the annoyed Tarek, and just laughs at our hero's face for charging recklessly like that, to which the fatty responds annoyingly, admitting that they are actually running really late. There are also two elf ladies present, and not surprisingly, they look utterly terrified at first glance. Apparently, this fat jerk has arranged these two poor girls as payment to Lantas, but thankfully, our hero has already sent him into the depths of hell where he can no longer torture or sexualize any more slaves, and just laughs at our hero's face for charging recklessly like that, but invites him to come at him nonetheless. And it seems things are getting intense out here. The soldiers are getting ready to face their enemy, and one hit from their opponent just turns them into a bloody mess. Of course, it is our idiot who can be seen causing chaos again. Despite trying to just gently tap the soldiers down, he ends up whacking them brutally hard, making more work for the saint who is using some magical mojo to erase their painful memories. Seeing the saint at work, the boy can clearly recall that the spell he is using is meant to heal broken hearts, which helps to fade painful memories in the process. To which, the little priest innocently confirms, and further adds that it can also wipe away hurtful memories inflicted by physical attacks as well. By the way, we almost forgot they have apparently infiltrated the fat guy's turf. While strolling down the corridor, the redhead proudly asks what our idiot hero would have done with the witnesses if he had come alone. My man, being a brute, makes it clear he would have just barged inside and returned with the motherfucker's head. That is when the redhead also expresses his eagerness to see our boy beat the crap out of that guy. Not gonna lie, despite the priest's pretty and innocent face, he probably really does let his darker side show sometimes. Anyway, as they are strolling down, they bump into a familiar face who is ready to kick the intruders out of his master's turf. Seeing this, the boy steps up to this green fella and reminds him that he is an honored warrior and should not be protecting someone who is not worth it. But, you know how it goes, intelligence is not exactly the orc's strong suit. So he just kinda mumbles back that wielding his sword to protect his master is his duty. If he were to give in and bend his will, he just could not see himself as a warrior. Our hero also hits him with another reality check, saying being a slave does not exactly fit the bill of a warrior. Once again, these complex ideas are not really sinking in for the orc, so he just repeats that being a warrior is his duty, whether he is forced into it as a slave or not. Hearing this, my guy just smirks, seeing a prime example of a simple-minded creature, and he is about to use this naivety to his advantage since talking it out is not gonna work. Meanwhile, the priest behind our hero is totally baffled to see him fluently speaking the language of the orcs. After being totally blown away by Reifenhardt's fluency in orc language, Cirrus steps up, saying she will handle this guy while the rest head inside to find the noble. As you might have already guessed, she has got some beef with that orc, and she is itching for a rematch to finish the last fight they started. The feeling is mutual for the orc as well, and he will not hold back either this time, much like he did in their previous fight. With that settled, Reifenhardt assigns the saint the role of supporter, telling him to watch her back, to which the guy nods confidently, ready to face whatever comes ahead. After that, the boy starts walking down the corridor again. But as soon as he crosses paths with the orc, the green guy simply asks our hero if he is trying to humiliate a warrior by not fighting. To this, the boy uses the orc's simple-mindedness to his advantage, and reminds him that his opponent is the elf girl right in front of him. As such, it would not be a good idea to disrespect her simply by not acknowledging her as an opponent. As you can imagine, the orc responds positively, and the boy just smirks with a warm heart, seeing the straightforwardness of this innocent creature. In any case, just as he approaches to the main hall, he notices this purple mist swirling around the area, which his nose picks up as in smell of drugs. Nevertheless, he opens the gate, and from that point onward, we do not really know what he saw, but the man looks totally terrified. Whatever he just witnessed is seriously out of whack because there is blood splattered everywhere, and the smell of drugs is clouding the entire area. And soon after, these two lowly degenerates come to our view totally naked, and when these disgusting fucks look around and see our hero standing there, who appears totally devastated, they rudely ask about the intruder's identity. While the jar releases the sweet incense of drugs, these two filthy swine sternly demand to know who gave our hero permission to enter. But the boy is too devastated to speak anything after seeing both elves lying lifeless and naked on the ground. The sight simply shatters his soul. Rage and desperation engulf his entire heart, and even if thousands of people shouldered the amount of despair he is feeling right now, they would have just crumbled under it. That is how intense Reifenhardt's feelings are at that moment. On the other hand, this gross dude is literally yelling his head off, calling for his orcish warrior. But you already know the drill. Nobody's showing up to rescue his disgusting mug face today. So out of desperation, he pulls out the old money card, trying to bribe our furious hero with some wad of cash. But when Mr. Moneybags realizes that his good old trick is not working, he starts thinking Reifenhardt must be some sort of button man, who is probably sent by the Tauben Trade Union. Meanwhile, Reifenhardt's eyes are burning with sheer frustration after seeing what this bastard did to those ladies. This is when the realization hits him even harder that Cyrus had to endure such cruelty under this pig for an entire decade in his past life. As the jerk keeps blabbering about money and whatnot, our hero cuts through the nonsense by reminding him that he's just as despicable as he remembers from his past life. After finally giving a devastated and well-deserved blow to this man's gut, Reifenhardt makes it crystal clear that he might have missed the chance before, but he is surely going to give this fatty the punishment he deserves. Meanwhile, the fatty's drool and snot all merge into one pathetic mess after that punch. And that is just the start of the beatdown this guy is in for, because after Reifenhardt grabs the bastard like he is handling a slaughtered lamb, he menacingly extends his hand. And the next thing we see is blood splattering everywhere, turning that purple head's face as pale as eggplant, like he is watching a scene straight out of a horror flick. After finally dropping the fat guy dead, Reifenhardt lets this dead man know that this is exactly what the innocent elves felt when he mercilessly tore them to shreds for his sadistic pleasure. Well, I was expecting our hero to take his sweet time with this guy, given how this fatty is supposed to be the villain of this arc. Anyway, there is still another guy to deal with, who is pointing fingers at our boy for supposedly being a murderer. But the boy just scoffs at the hypocrisy, especially since this jerk just killed an elf along with his partner. Just as the disgusting nobleman is trying to talk his way out of his impending demise, the two ladies arrive at the entrance. And when they see that old bastard lying there lifeless, Cyrus lets out a horrified gasp, totally shocked by the brutality before her eyes. However, our boy insists that this man deserved every bit of pain inflicted on him, a sentiment the elf lady totally agrees with. She then turns to the redhead, who for some odd reason can be seen really cool despite the gruesome sight before his eyes. I guess for him, this kind of mess is not all that shocking, considering he has been in this line of work for as long as he can remember. He then reveals to our hero about how Cyrus took care of Toccata single-handedly without requiring any help. But instead of hogging all the glory, the girl mentions how she would not have been standing here if it was not for the saint's healing powers. After hearing that Toccata is still hanging on, albeit barely breathing, Reifenhardt scans the area, feeling somewhat relieved. Anyway, let us wrap up this reunion and focus on the final guy who is screaming his lungs out after realizing that the elf he returned earlier is here. That is when Cyrus gets even more terrified as she spots the dead elf child on the ground. She demands to know if this bastard is the one responsible, but he just sneers arrogantly, asking her what she is going to do about it even if he did kill him. Well, he definitely picked the wrong time to be cocky, and without further delay, Cyrus leisurely draws her blade from its scabbard, leaving the guy trembling in fear. Even in his dire situation, he still has the nerve to ask if she is really going to kill him over some measly serpent. Well, actions have consequences, so inevitably, she slices him down with her blade to finally avenge the soul of the child this despicable man took. Just as this guy turns into a bloody mess and begs for mercy, he gets brutally stabbed by her sword once again, finally putting an end to this filthy scumbag for laying his filthy hands on those girls. It is a somber moment for our hero too. Despite doing the world a favor by taking down both monsters, he cannot seem to find any solace in all the bloodshed. Anyway, the next scene shifts outside into the forest, where flames flicker in the cold night. There, we see elves and orcs seeking refuge in the woods. Thankfully, they seem to be the slaves from the mansion who just escaped. 7 female elves and 9 male orcs have been rescued from that hellhole, with Toccata lending a hand in the rescue mission. He has also pledged his loyalty to Cyrus's master after being defeated by her, and that master is our hero of course. Meanwhile, the saint is totally blown away to see the gender ratio tip to only one side, and the reason behind this is that the male elves and female orcs are really popular, so it's explained the reason behind it. As Cirrus observes the emotional scene of refugees comforting each other, she cannot shake off our hero's words about the unrecognized emotions of slaves. After coming this far with him, she begins to question if she might have misjudged him after all. And just like that, our hero shows up with his trademark sweet smile, apologizing to everyone for making them wait. As it turns out, the reason for his tardiness is that he was busy rummaging through the entire mansion to find the slave contract, and the seal of Rolophane's union leader along with it. When he is asked where he found these crucial documents, he simply shrugs and casually mentions that while he was busting through the walls, he happened to stumble upon a secret safe. The saint gives him a horrified look and calls him barbaric, which is probably the most insulting word he has heard in his 50 years of life. But just as he blurts that out, the saint catches on and wastes no time in asking what the heck he means by 50 years. Realizing his slip-up, the idiot quickly turns his head away, cursing himself for his foolish mistake. On the other hand, his unexpected reaction definitely piques the interest of both ladies. Anyway, the redhead steps forward and asks why he brought those contracts, to which the boy just tells him that he will know soon enough. And as he says this, he immediately turns to the terrified elves and orcs, letting them know that they are free to choose between a life of freedom or slavery. Whatever they want to choose, it is their call to make. This declaration only adds to the anxiety of the already nervous group of refugees. It is disheartening to realize that these poor creatures do not even fully understand what freedom entails. It is utterly heartbreaking how humans have belittled these innocent creatures to the extent that they cannot even grasp the concept of real freedom. After seeing their obliviousness about something as important as freedom, the boy just wears an underwhelming look on his face. When the redhead asks if he plans to sell them back to the auction, the boy immediately denies it. This prompts the saint to question if he is planning to give up being an adventurer just to take care of these people. Reifenhardt clarifies that he is not giving up on his adventures, since he has not yet reached his goal of establishing an empire. However, after releasing these individuals from their slavery contracts, he cannot just leave them stranded with no place to call home. His first priority is to educate them and help them understand their newfound freedom. The next scene cuts to the heart of the town, where the streets are eerily empty under the starlit sky. We find ourselves at the Tauben Trade Union headquarters once again. Inside, the first thing we notice is the terrified expression on the face of the union leader. He is visibly shaken as our hero takes a seat right before him, accompanied by the former slaves who belong to his rival company, run by Tarek. To make things worse, my man lets this guy know he'll be looking after these people, and he also wants this dude to keep it all secret as well. When Tauben asks how in the world he acquired these slaves, the boy simply replies that he will find out soon enough, hopefully by tomorrow. He assures Tauben that the news he will hear by the morning will be quite interesting, and will help him decide whether to keep this secret or not. If word gets out that he is harboring slaves from the Rolefian Trade Union, he will be the one under scrutiny. Well then, even without knowing the details of what transpired at the Rolefian Trade Union, the merchant can tell that whatever happened is seriously problematic. He is in deep trouble, and he knows it. But in the very next moment, our hero leaves the merchant speechless when he casually flips over a stash of 100 coins before his eyes. I am pretty sure that much money is enough to put any doubts or lingering confusion to rest. And as expected, the merchant quickly collects the coins back into his pouch, mentioning he has a place near the edge of the Zeppelin, where he can hide them along with his other slaves. Before handing over these people, Reifenhardt wants confirmation that no one besides himself will touch or treat them like slaves. The man assures him of their utmost care, though he is still clueless as to why he is being paid such an enormous amount. That is when our hero tells him to use the extra money to educate these folks. When the bewildered merchant asks if they had not already been educated, the boy corrects him, revealing with a big grin that he wants them to learn language, numbers for accounting, history, philosophy, and even medicine if possible. Since this merchant is just another average human being, with no regard for these people's emotions, it is not surprising that Tauben is confused as to why our hero wants to go to such lengths. Knowing he cannot sway common people with fancy talk about freedom and such, Reifenhardt decides to go with something which is definitely going to resonate with these profit-oriented individuals, and he clears out Tauben's concerns by stating that the more skills one slave has, the more utility they have to offer to their master. Even then, Tauben still does not seem to grasp how a slave can handle such intellectual tasks. Once again, our hero pushes this naturally business-oriented guy by mentioning that if he succeeds in educating these slaves, they will have more value, ultimately benefiting him in the long run. However, the merchant raises a legitimate concern about how they are going to persuade those naturally arrogant scholars who despise other species other than their own kind. As you might have guessed already, my man has got it all figured out. If they cannot get the scholars themselves, they can hire their peasant students who are in need to make a quick buck. Even though those students might not have much to offer, our hero is not expecting these orcs to turn into Albert Einstein, since basic knowledge and training will suffice for the time being. The merchant does not have much to say, though he still cannot figure out what this goofball is trying to achieve by doing all this. He believes that teaching these creatures is like talking to a brick wall. As we are already aware of, our hero does not see things that way, nor did he find it outlandish to educate a slave, despite what others might think. He recalls that there were a few who proposed such an idea in his past life, but the upper class, the major league of slave owners, never accepted it. They viewed the idea as equivalent to teaching a dog to paint, all because of the solidified belief that otherworldly species are inferior to humans. And Reifenhardt is about to play this belief to his advantage. Well, you see, the reason humans do not bother educating slaves is some ancient prevention tactic against potential slave rebellion, although most folks nowadays probably do not even realize that is the root cause. Even then, once these slaves start getting some schooling, our boy's pretty sure Taubin is going to be shocked when he sees slaves can actually understand stuff. That very light bulb moment will likely push Taubin to start teaching his own slaves. And that is where our hero sees his opening. Once the slaves are learning and Taubin sees the benefits, other slave owners are bound to follow suit. It just makes sense for a slave owner or any business person if their slaves are smarter and more capable. And if things go just as he had planned, this whole education thing could catch on like wildfire across the continent. The thought of watching himself stride down the path to success puts an unconditional smile on his face. He is pretty sure he is going to change people's minds this time, something he could not quite manage to achieve in his past life. The scene shifts back to the dormitories, where our hero is seen anxiously asking for some cash. The ladies are totally thrown off by his unexpected demand, to which he explains that he ended up giving away all his money because he did not factor in travel expenses before. Upon hearing this, Cirrus suggests returning her outfit for some quick cash if he is that desperate. But, as you can imagine, the idiot would rather starve than miss a single day without admiring her hotness at its peak. After a bit of playful banter, Cirrus starts to laugh heartily, a moment our clueless hero fails to recognize as significant. Because for her, it is the first genuine laugh she has had since becoming a slave, a precious moment of joy after enduring pain and suffering all those years. The next day arrives with the entire Zeppelin abuzz with a single piece of news. The leaders of the great trade unions, Rolofane's Tarek and Karen's Beret, have been found dead, their bodies cold. The culprit remains unknown, and even the employers called to the case have no recollection of what happened, leading to mixed-up testimonies and an unsolvable mystery. 2 weeks have passed after that incident, and we are greeted with the sight of a dungeon being infiltrated, likely by adventurers. And as you might have guessed, these intruders are apparently our heroes. The saint can be seen obliterating undead creatures with his divine powers, while Cirrus proves herself just as formidable, smashing through enemies like it is no big deal. On the flip side, our hero is on a whole another wavelength. He is just standing there, letting those undead creatures tickle him with their swords. He is holding back from obliterating them because he wants to see how the priest and Cirrus can work together. He is totally blown away to see that the saint can easily keep pace with Cirrus, even though he is not much of a fighter himself. It makes him wonder just how old this dude was when he first stepped onto the battlefield. He is pretty sure that if the saint keeps improving at this rate, he might even surpass his arch-nemesis, who goes by the name Saintess Ellen. At this point, our hero cannot shake the curiosity about why he never had heard of his name in his previous life, and just laughs at our hero's face for charging recklessly like that, but invites him to come at him. Once the saint has been put through the ringer, Reifenhardt casually moves around and smashes the monsters with just his mere presence. He then asks the poor exhausted redhead if he has started to get hang of it, to which the saint cannot help but gripe about how these monsters are tougher than the ones they faced in the last dungeon. However, our hero mentions that these mobs are actually the easier ones, because they took the back route of the ruins. Anyway, after their dungeon crawl, they arrive at the Grain Kingdom, located near the Settlard Mountain, and it took them 2 weeks after leaving Chatten to reach this place. This place has the forgotten ancient ruins of Aleutian, where our hero hopes to regain his magical powers. When they get there, they find a giant door sealed by magic, and no amount of brute force is enough to open this door. And just when the redhead thinks they are out of options without a mage, our hero puts his hands together and starts chanting. Needless to say, this gesture totally throws the little guy for a loop, seeing this muscle-bound powerhouse casting a spell. When Reifenhardt casually mentions that he used to be a mage as well, the priest is absolutely blown away. It is one thing to be great at martial arts and use an aura, but having spellcasting knowledge too is just totally flipping the little guy's mind. It seems the little guy was blown away for nothing, as our hero is taking forever to gather some mana just to cast an amateur 3-circle spell, and just laughs at our hero's face for charging recklessly like that, but invites him to come at him nonetheless. After seeing our hero's slow-ass magic casting, the little priest does not waste the opportunity to throw a verbal jab, telling the boy that given how he took 13 minutes to open a single door, he better not ever claim to be a mage again. You see, back in his prime, our hero was the first mage ever to pull off 10-circle magic, and I have told you that much already. That is why he is on this quest now, looking for something called Aleutian's Voice, hoping it will at least get him halfway decent if not back to his former glory. After a short stroll, they hit a dead end with nothing inside, except for a stick our boy could use as a makeshift back scratcher before trudging back. Anyway, they trudge on through the cold mountains, while the little priest tries to cheer up Reifen's dejected spirit, reminding him that he cannot always be the first in everything. While actually, the main concern for Ryfin is that illusion was only discovered 17 years from now because he was the one who found it in the first place. Seeing the future change like this is really creeping him out. Although as disappointed as our hero might be, the saint is just happy they did not come out empty-handed. Yep, the stick Cirrus is holding is the only thing they got. But suddenly, as soon as she utters the word Nylon, this arcane green energy starts swirling around her entire body. What we thought was just an ordinary stick, useful only as a back scratcher, turns out to be a full-fledged magical weapon. Apparently, it is a bow known as Nylon, which shoots arrows made from mana. Depending on the user's concentration, it can shoot multiple arrows in a row. This thing is definitely not ordinary wood, since it is actually a branch from the Tree of Life, Elfenheim. Also, if you have any doubts about this thing's capabilities, you can see how Cirrus just obliterated an entire tree with a single shot, which leaves both ladies in utter astonishment and happiness after witnessing the true potential of this stick. It appears that Riefenhart knew all along about the stick's capabilities, because it used to be Cirrus's main weapon in his past life. And when the saint asks how he knew about this weapon, he simply shrugs, saying he had just heard about it. Seeing our hero still looking bummed out, the saint tries to cheer him up, saying there are plenty of dungeons left to explore and they might find something cool after all. However, Riefenhart knows that nothing can replace Aleutian's voice, because it is the only artifact that could have helped him get his former powers back. After their long journey, they finally catch the sight of Jehelen village from the top of the hill. The red-headed saint in particular just cannot contain his excitement at the sight. After all, they had been craving a good meal during all of their journey, and it appears that the time has finally come. Soon enough, there was a whole spread of tantalizing food, laid out perfectly on the table for them to devour. With all those mouth-watering dishes in front of them, the trio wasted no time diving in, much to the amusement of the restaurant owner, who could not help but chuckle at their enthusiasm. As they savored every bite, the lady mentioned how some guests they had earlier had been quite the complainers, even to the point of irritating her. Out of curiosity, the boy asks about these guests, and the woman reveals they were a group of knights from a noble family who had visited about a week ago. Well then, it did not take long for our hero to connect the dots and deduce that those knights might just be the ones holding onto his Aleutian's voice. Eager to learn more, the boy attempts to bribe the lady with a coin, expressing his desire to hear more about those knights. However, his gesture only serves to make her feel awkward, prompting her to politely request him to put his money back. Shortly after, she began narrating that almost a week ago, Viscount Kelbrin arrived with an exploration team. But what caught her eye was how the other members of the team seemed to hold themselves in higher regard than the Viscount himself. Among them was a knight clad in gleaming gold armor from head to toe, which was a sight that amused her greatly. Despite his extravagant appearance, she admitted he was quite pleasant. After hearing about this gold boy armed with a golden sword, our hero's mind immediately connects the dots once again, realizing that the only person fitting that description is the Golden Knight of the Graham Kingdom's Count Teen's family. The next scene takes us to the Graham Kingdom's royal palace. Inside we see two nobles sitting face to face on this rather long dining table. While both of them are digging into their meal, the man sitting across the table compliments the Goldie boy for his remarkable performance in the ruins, although he is not too surprised, considering it is what is expected from the Golden Knight of Graham. As you might have guessed already, this golden boy is none other than Eustace Teens, the knight commander of the Teens family, and the man sitting across the table is Viscount Kelbrin. Despite clearing the dungeon single-handedly, he reassures the Viscount that he will still receive 1/3 of the loot they snagged from the dungeon as promised. To which the Viscount responds that he does not really care much about material possessions, as he is content simply with the honor of fighting alongside someone as formidable as Eustace. But when we take a peek inside the Viscount's noggin, we learn he is actually not sweating about the cash, as he is more about scoring a solid friendship with Sir Eustace. When the knight asks what will his company do with the adamantite and the orichalcum they found, which is a rarest material of this time, the Viscount just chuckles, saying he will probably whip up some weapons with the help of those dirty dwarves. Eustace then gives props to the Kelbrin family's mining game, joking that the Viscount must have a whole squad of dwarfs on the payroll. The man brushes it off by a simple smile and smoothly shifts gears by introducing his adorable daughters. Instead of giving high fives to the young ladies, the knight gives a piece of his mind, saying he is not planning on getting close to any women other than his wife. Hearing this, Viscount Kelbrin is totally thrown for a loop, wondering if the rumors he heard about him were way off base. But still, he's not letting go of this great opportunity to get close to the Goldies family, so he decides to offer a hand in marriage to the knight's brother instead. But as soon as he merely mentions the word sibling, the old man finds himself jumping out of his skin as the knight shatters a glass with his bare hands. Eustace appears absolutely livid at this point, and while he is seething with pure anger and frustration, he coldly lets the Viscount know that he does not have any siblings he speaks of. By now, the poor old coot is sweating profusely out of fear, his nerves shot to the moon as he stammers out apologies for his slip-up. The thick tension in the room is suddenly shattered when someone bursts in, catching everyone off guard. And before anyone can catch their breath, the intruder urgently spills the beans. A demon has busted out of one of the relics, and this bad boy is not playing nice. He is tossing soldiers around like they are nothing, and just his sheer size is causing earthquakes with every step. Hearing the commotion, the Goldie stands up and proceeds to casually glance outside to see what is happening outside, while wondering if there is a summoning artifact among the treasures they found. But what he sees outside is something he definitely did not sign up for, leaving him grinding his teeth in frustration at the sight of the last person he wanted to see. Apparently, there is a guy strolling forward towards the monster, seemingly calling all the shots. He is ordering everyone to evacuate the civilians and commanding the platoon to maintain formation. While the soldiers follow his orders, we get a glimpse of the man in question, who appears quite young. The mages start enchanting spells as instructed, and bombard the behemoth with frosty attacks to slow its movements. The guy gives props to the spellcasters for tying up the monster's legs, and just as he continues his determined march towards the behemoth, someone shouts out, questioning his reckless actions. At this point, we also learn that this determined yet foolish guy goes by the name Russ. As soon as he leaps into the air, the monster glances back to spot this pesky guy heading his way. But the dude manages to land a solid blow nonetheless, seeing that Monster Bleed puts a grin on his face. But his victory dance is cut short when he spots a counterattack coming his way, which shatters his sword to pieces and sends him crashing to the ground in a total mess with just one blow. While he is struggling to get up from that devastating blow, one of the soldiers standing nearby in disbelief gets obliterated by the behemoth, which leaves his body splattering in every direction. Then, another commanding voice cuts through the thick of the battlefield, ordering his underling to leave the foolish guy on the ground and maintain the formation. This commanding figure is none other than the Golden Knight, who turns out to be the brother of the boy on the ground. However, it is clear that Goldie does not like being called this blackhead's brother. He believes that the great knights of teens are not born from the stomachs of dirty stray dogs. Needless to say, this sly remark almost brings this grown man to tears, stinging more than any physical blow. As he rests his giant golden sword over his shoulder, this cocky guy makes it crystal clear that facing a demon is a job for aura users only. Then, with a mighty swing, he brings his massive sword down to the ground, shattering it with just one blow. He hoists his sword back up into the air, charging it up with this golden energy, before slamming it down horizontally, ready to charge at the monster. Before he dashes off, he throws a taunt at his brother, telling him to open his eyes and witness a true knight in action. And with that grand declaration, his sword begins to transform, a magical suit enveloping his body as if he is some kind of fucking medieval Iron Man. Once his transformation is done, he becomes this guy straight out of a Power Rangers set, ready to take on anything. Before we dive into the showdown, the scene shifts to the middle of the night, at one of the hotels where our crew is chilling. We can see the Saint is teasing our hero for not knowing someone as famous as that cocky Golden Knight. To his defense, Reifenhardt mentions that he has been living in the mountains after all, so he is not up to speed on all the fancy politics and stuff. In any case, the redhead proceeds to explain, mentioning that the guy is one of the most formidable magic swordsmen out there and could easily be considered an aura user. After hearing all that, our hero just brushes it off and starts complimenting Cirrus on how much glamorous she looks in her new pajamas. But the priest continues with his revelation, going on about how even if that guy is strong, and how he can be compared to an actual aura user, given that he only uses the power of some magical tool to flex his muscles. That's when Reifenhardt throws in his 2 cents, mentioning that the magic armor Eldred is the strongest magic armor around, even though mastering it is a whole other story. You see, true gold Eldril is this super rare magic metal, even rarer than true silver mithril. And from that Eldril, they make the magic armor Eldred and the magic sword Eldrin. These artifacts are the cream of the crop from the relics of the Silver Age, passed down through generations in the Teens County. The magic swordsman who wields Eldred and Eldrin is dubbed the Golden Knight. And if you are wearing Eldred, simple declarations can trigger insanely powerful magic, leveling the playing field with an aura user. But of course, it is all about knowing how to use it properly. After witnessing this Goldie bastard giving that monster a run for its money, it is clear he can actually utilize this armor to its fullest potential. Before delivering the final blow, he awakens all the power of his sword. With his 8th circle spell, known as Material Destruction, he crashes down on the beast, obliterating everything in his path. Meanwhile, back with our party, Reifenhardt explains that Teens County is one of the few families that truly researched how to properly use Eldred's power. Just having a powerful tool does not automatically make someone strong. The Saint points out how nonchalant our hero seems about the magic swordsman, noting that aura users usually don't get along with magic swordsmen, and some of them do not even acknowledge them as fighters at all. To clarify things, Reifenhardt explains that the Teens County stands out because they have a unique technique for utilizing magic armor, which sets them apart from most sword techniques. When we look back at the Golden Knight, we can clearly see him obliterating his enemy with his distinctive swordsmanship. Reifenhardt also believes that even if someone works hard to perfect their sword technique, they cannot be sure of reaching the level of an aura user. However, there is always one Golden Knight in each generation, and having martial artists with the power of an aura user in the family is a great benefit. But having a magic swordsman who can use Eldred is like having one in a million. As soon as Reifenhart finishes his explanation, the fighting sequence ends with the complete obliteration of the monster. The crowd on the sidelines cheers seeing the monster fall. Even the bastard brother cannot help but admire his sibling's moment of glory, feeling a bit inadequate himself. Meanwhile, our hero is having similar thoughts, wondering if he could ever match up to that guy. Hearing Reifen muttering to himself, the redhead asks if he is thinking of taking on the Count of Teens too. The hero explains that this is the only way he can retrieve that artifact. In response, the saint asks if he plans to snatch it now. But the clueless boy does not get what he means about stealing, so he just gives him a confused look. That's when he explains that in the Principality of Chatten, he sided with our hero because he was right. But since the Count of Teens explored the ruins, they rightfully own the artifacts. So, if the boy tries to take it, he is basically stealing. Suddenly, Reifen's light bulb goes off, and he realizes the saint is spot on with his observation. Reifenhart never saw it coming, and he has got no clue how to convince her without bringing up his past life. With no other choice, he spins a story about his martial clan that hides treasures in ruins as gifts for their disciples. He says his master, who is known as Gerard, did the same and hid an item for him to find on his own. But the saint throws a curveball, asking if his master had already explored the Aleutian ruins. Then why did not he take any of the other Silver Age artifacts inside? Our hero, thinking on his feet, explains that those artifacts were meant to be little extras along with the big reward. To nail his point, he points out that he would never have recognized nylon, which was an ordinary stick, and this only proves his point that the ruins do indeed have been explored before. He further adds that if the ruins were truly unexplored, he would not have known about any of the shortcuts they had to take to get there. Even though the clueless saint finds it hard to swallow the fibs, he goes along with the story anyway. On the other hand, the fucker just turns his sweaty and embarrassed face away, feeling foolish for spouting such nonsense, even though it is not far from the truth since he did explore that ruin before anyone else. In any case, the saint remarks that the whole situation is really tangled up, asking if they actually have to take on those royals. Our boy just shrugs it off, saying it is all in the hands of the gods, and there is not much he can do about it. Meanwhile, the Golden Knight is just soaking up compliments from his peers for his stellar performance as usual. Before he leaves, Eustace turns to his bastard brother, reminding him that charging into danger like an imbecile is not what a true swordsman of teens does, and also advises him to better learn more moves, instead of that same stupid downward slash technique of his. Even then, Russ insists he is still a swordsman of teens, no matter what anyone says. The next day dawns with the sun painting everything in its warm glow. We spot the same guy from yesterday, getting his workout in bright and early. Suddenly, two dudes roll up, demanding to know why he pulled that crazy stunt yesterday. The guy just shrugs it off, saying he was just doing his job. But these guys are not here to cut him any slack, and starts to throw shade, asking who gave him orders to go all impulsive like that. In response, the boy just comes simpler with his words, saying he is a swordsman of teens too, and if they have got a problem with his knightly honor, well, they are welcome to settle it with a fight. Given their arrogance, both soldiers just walk forward while clicking their tongues and still calling our hero every name in the book. Despite what anyone says about him, Russ is actually really a strong individual. But what is holding him back from being the greatest swordsman is that he only knows one technique, which is known as the downward slash, along with the breathing technique that follows. His blade cuts through the air with perfect timing, so smooth that the movement is almost invisible. Even a master swordsman would be impressed by his strike, though his technique has some flaws, as it was pretty sloppy, and not something that can be used under normal circumstances. In any case, the House of Teens never recognized Russ's true potential. As a noble family with a legacy of knights, they had specific sword techniques for their warriors. But Russ never learned those techniques because his father never taught him any. The reason his father disapproved was because liegemen did not like the idea of teaching a bastard any family's sword arts. So, all his dad could pass down was a fragment of their family's once great sword path. This fragment also held the key to unlocking their aura, and his dad had high hope for his son. That's exactly why Russ works hard, because he believes that the true essence of the Sword of Teens, once powerful, now only exists in the downward slashing sword path. He wants to make his father proud by proving that this sword art is not the trashy move everyone makes it out to be, and he is determined to show everyone the hidden power within it, and reclaim the honor of his family's legacy. While his Goldie bro watches him through the window, he cannot help but think Russ is wasting his time with that downward slash. After all, the rest of the sword path has already disappeared, and he just sees him as a fool for his futile efforts. Even then, he just can't ignore the determination and talent his bastard brother has. After the sun has finally gone down, we see our hero, looking more like an underpaid thug wandering around the streets of the town. As you might have guessed already, he is hunting for that precious relic, and he is definitely not thrilled about sneaking around in a hoodie and mask. Upon reaching the area, he finally witnesses the grandeur of the castle, and the only folks he can think of who could create such a magnificent structure are the dwarves who were probably worked to the bone by Viscount Kelbrin, who is in the mining business. Anyway, as he climbs further, he spots 3 guards and knocks them unconscious with just a mere stroke of his hand. As he ventures further inside, he spots two soldiers on night duty. One of them complains about why they would have to give a night watch since no one would dare to invade the castle, especially when the Golden Knight is already staying there. I guess these fools are about to be proven wrong, because they have already started to look around after sensing someone suspicious, while our hero silently sticks to the ceiling. After breezing past those two goons, the idiot starts bragging about how thievery might be his thing after all, or maybe he has just got a knack for it. It seems the moment has arrived where he must employ serious skill to overcome these two fully trained knights of teens who are dutifully standing their post. And despite their shiny armor and high rank, my guy just takes one out with a single blow, and shocks the other one until he is out cold. With them out of the picture, he is finally just a few feet away from getting his relic back. But just as he checks out the area, he is surprised by a motion detection barrier and a heat detection spell, which he obviously knows what these things do, but not being able to disarm them really ticks him off. Anyway, he starts snooping around, because a magical barrier cannot work without a core. Once he finally spots it, he can feel the runes engraved inside the stone. After smashing the stone with his bare hands, the magic on the door starts fading, and soon enough, he is inside the storeroom, only to see an almost endless sea of products. While looking around, he stumbles upon some magical rare items that he really misses from his past life. He also spots some shiny swords with big names attached to them, but they do not seem to be the real deal. They are probably knockoffs. Heck, they cannot even pass as knockoffs. Even though they look similar, the magic constitution is all out of whack, which is hard for him to wrap his head around. In any case, once he finally spots the much-desired illusion's voice, which is suspiciously sitting above that wooden box. Nonetheless, he takes an eager step forward, and accidentally his feet push against this string. But he still seems clueless about what is going on, so he takes a quick look around. And almost instantly, the bell above him starts to ring, which is definitely the alarm he triggered during his not-so-cautious footsteps. Reifenhardt is freaking out by now, having come all this way just to stumble into a lousy booby trap. Well, looks like he is not exactly cut out for this thievery gig after all. Meanwhile, Viscount's holed up in his room, absolutely terrified after hearing the alarm. As for my guy, he is sprinting like his life depends on it because word on the street is there is an intruder in the southern tower. On his way, he is plowing through everyone like a mad bull, not even slowing down for a breath. There are also knights and mages blocking the main path, threatening to turn the intruder into a human torch. Right on cue, the mages unleash crackling fire toward our hero, who is scrambling to get out of harm's way. And once he reaches one of the knight's shoulders, the boy apologizes to this clueless man before using him as a shield to dodge the scorching flames. After roasting the poor guy to a crisp, the platoon leader yells at our hero for his devilish act. But honestly, my guy did not act on impulse. He knew the knight's armor had some divine protection going on. Still, the leader is not giving him any breaks and fires a bunch of arrows at him. To our hero, they are nothing more than annoying toothpicks. But those arrows were just a distraction, because the real problem is these chains that suddenly start nibbling around him, sticking like glue and refusing to let go. Seizing the opportunity, the platoon commander orders his party to blow this guy up. Just when our hero thinks he is done for, the same idiot from before bursts onto the scene, forcing his way through the soldiers' formation. The captain is yelling at Russ to get the heck away, and even Rifen thinks this man is acting like a fool. Even then, Russ finally breaks through the crowd and raises his sword to deliver a devastating blow, leaving the captain screaming his lungs out. Russ keeps marching forward, completely ignoring the chaos he is causing by breaking the soldiers' formation. And when our hero hears the name Russ from the captain's mouth, he just can't put his finger on it even if someone with the name even existed in his past life. He can see that this guy's moves, breaths, and steps are all just as simple as they can get. But what really creeps the hell out of our boy is the way he swung his sword. And once he does swing, Rifen does not waste a second to seize the golden opportunity to blow away those pesky chains. While Russ's sword is still tangled in that chain, the hero lands a devastating blow right near his kidney, sending him crashing to the ground like a mere pebble skipping the water surface. Once he is standing tall, Rifen is totally blown away to see that this dude can swing his sword with so much power, yet he does not even try to defend himself. His train of thought is abruptly cut short when he hears a familiar voice, and the next thing he knows, swings of a blade are coming his way. But he manages to handle them rather easily. And of course, the one behind the attack is the cocky Goldie bastard, getting even cockier in seconds in his shiny golden armor. When they finally face off, the Golden Knight can see our hero has got some serious skills for a regular guy. But my man is not in the mood for catching up, and this cocky knight does not seem to enjoy an idle chit-chat either. So, following the Jim Unbreakable's motto of attack first, Rifen takes the liberty to swing toward the man, and the knight reciprocates with the same gesture and energy. As soon as they are locked in each other's stares, both are startled to see each other recklessly marching forward, leading them to clumsily swing their respective weapons, which is fist in our hero's case. and after dodging each other's blows, they both take a step back to put a safe distance, in order to catch their breaths after that heart-pounding encounter. The onlookers are totally caught off guard by that reckless close call, and even both fighters admit to themselves that they had underestimated each other. This time, the Goldie takes a swing, unleashing its shadow of the abyss and roar, but my guy ain't no slouch. He effortlessly sidesteps those shadows, though he seems a bit surprised to see someone busting out something as powerful as howling shadows. On the other hand, the knight also finds himself really bewildered to see our hero barely making an effort to disperse his howling shadow by immediately picking up its weak point. So, he begrudgingly gives props to our boy's mad skills at countering magic spells, which our hero just shrugs off by saying he just happens to know a lot about magic. Anyway, the Goldie retaliates without any warnings once again, and the boy, as usual, avoids the direct hit like a ninja. That's when a serious exchange of blows kicks off, with the knight swinging away trying to tag his opponent with his sword, and our hero being a slippery snake, just avoiding those strikes left and right. Soon after, Reifenhardt lands a solid punch square on the knight's chest, sending shockwaves through his whole body, which leaves his veins bulging out from the sheer pain. And what's even more painful is the realization that he's feeling the sting of that punch even inside his formidable armor. As soon as we resume the story, we find out the Golden Knight is retaliating with his sword pointed at our hero. But before those flames and wind arrows could hit him, he jumps to the other side, leaving fire and wind crashing onto the ground, obliterating everything in its path. Watching our hero darting around infuriates the knight, so he unleashes a massive fire bubble that annihilates everything in its path and keeps chasing down Reifen. By now, our shocked hero has no doubt he is going to freaking die at this rate. As the fiery blow rocks the entire place, the smoke and dust start to settle. There stands our boy, glaring fiercely with those blazing eyes. While he cannot help but feel shocked to realize this knight can sling high-level magic, the Goldie, on the other hand, is blown away to realize our hero just blocked his one of the strongest attacks like it was nothing more than an annoyance in his way. The Goldie is pretty sure he would not have missed Reifen's movements, especially while using superhuman vision, unless our hero's an aura user. Well, looks like he is spot on with that observation, since the boy does indeed an aura user. Anyway, the knight gears up for another attack, and this time he tries to unleash his purple acidic mist, but Reifen shuts it down with almost little to no effort. Then, Reifen plants his feet firmly on the ground, and with a clear stance, he leaps directly at his opponent. One seemingly half-assed punch sends Goldie tumbling backward, and the punch was so fast that the knight did not even see it coming. After enduring a barrage of punches, each delivered with incredible flair, Goldie is certain by now that this guy is definitely an aura user. With that knowledge in mind, the knight decides to go all in this time. Previously, he felt at a disadvantage because he could not properly gauge our hero's skill level. Now that he knows Reifen's an aura user, it is a whole different ballgame for him. Seems like he is really starting to get under our boy's skin too. Because you can tell, Reifen is clearly struggling to dodge this attack. He probably always thought aura users were the most annoying beings to deal with, but looks like he has been proven wrong. Meanwhile, the other soldiers are just chilling and watching the chaos unfold from a safe distance, while Goldie is breathing down our boy's neck, probably wondering why someone skilled enough is out here pulling all-nighters with petty thievery. Upon hearing Goldie's ramblings, Reifen wonders if the guy's catching on that he is an aura user, even though he is not busting out his golden aura of the gem Unbreakable, which is too flashy for this situation. Meanwhile, Mr. Sherlock Goldie, with his detective hat firmly on, jumps to a wrong conclusion. Thinking our hero's new to the whole aura awakening gig, and just because he is not flaunting his aura, he gets all cocky and crashes down to the ground like a freaking meteor. With his sword poised for another strike, Goldie's golden energy starts swirling around him. As he advances with yet another formidable move, Reifenhardt is pretty damn sure if he does not do something quick, he is as good as dead. Soon after, as Reifen takes a closer look at this bastard, his eyes light up at the sight of that golden glow. Now, I do not know what hits his mind, but he sure takes his stance. And just as the sword's about to make contact, he whips out one of his own techniques, known as the Spiral Guard, all while giving a silent thanks to the heavens that this man is just a golden knight. The clash between those two forces is so intense, it sets off a blinding explosion that leaves everyone staggering backwards. Even Russ, on the sidelines, is totally blown away. After the dust settles from that huge explosion, we see the knight's face, pissed off beyond belief. He is absolutely thrown off to see that our hero just blocked the light of Eldril. Meanwhile, the boy looks like a wreck, blood leaking from his shoulder and head because he ended up using his Spiral Guard a tad too late. Anyway, he jumps out of the castle straight towards the ground and crashes down onto the frozen lake, shattering the ice bed on impact. As soon as one of the knights, Sir Lot, who commands the platoon, is ordered by Goldie to check on the storeroom and see what this guy has stolen. He also tells him to gather a search party because they cannot let this guy off the hook that easily. But Sir Lot is skeptical, mentioning that the guy probably kicked the bucket after that fall. Goldie denies it, insisting that there is no way he would have died from that. Suddenly, the scene cuts to the terrified Cirrus, who probably just woke up smack dab in the middle of the night. Seeing her, the priest also wakes up, asking her with his tired voice what is up. She responds that she is smelling something off, cannot quite put her finger on it, but she is sure it is a bad feeling. And whatever it is about Rifen, like he is in some kind of trouble. Looks like her gut feeling is not too far off, since we can see our hero sinking down into that cold water. Anyway, the next day rolls in, and the first thing in the morning, we see Cirrus and the priest being chased by soldiers. You ask why? Well, turns out they have been slapped with some hefty accusations of thievery by the palace soldiers. And as the girl carries the saint like a kid, the poor dude cannot help but grumble about his bruised ego, muttering how he is supposed to be a man and all, but this feels a tad emasculating. So, a regular Joe tips off the knight about our duo's location, and in appreciation, the knight tosses him a coin, before swiftly blocking our party's path. Once they are trapped, Shield Knight demands they drop their weapons and surrender on the spot. But do they comply? Nope, not even close. In fact, Cirrus whips out her Nylon bow and takes down one of the soldiers, leaving the other one shaking in his boots at how she pulled off that move with just a stick. Just then, Goldie himself shows up, questioning Sir Lot about the commotion. To this query, the junior explains they have stumbled upon some pretty unusual criminals. Goldie immediately tells Sir Lot to stand down, because he is taking the charge personally. On the other hand, after the saint sees that things are about to get real, he just swallows his pride, sets aside his ego as a man, and would not mind being carried by a girl once again. He also disappointingly mumbles to himself, wondering when Rifen will finally give him some muscle training. Before they bolt, Cirrus sets off a distraction with a blast. And just as they are about to make their escape, Goldie swoops in, floating above them like he owns the sky, telling them to freeze. Meanwhile, when the knight spots Cirrus's fancy sword, he is not just spooked, he is downright chilled to the bone. As you can imagine, that sword is not your run-of-the-mill blade. And he is a bit revolted to see that this high-level priest hooked this disgusting slave with a rare sword. After seeing the Golden Knight personally, the redhead has no doubt that Rifen is definitely in deep trouble. In any case, the Golden Knight appears out of nowhere before her eyes, and hits her with a devastating blow before she even blinks. After taking that hit, she is trying to shake it off, but the knight's already gearing up for round 2. But before we can see more of that showdown, the scene cuts to our hero, looking all beat up and lost. He is kicking himself for not going all out against that armored jerk who was basically a walking tank. Well, he is not dwelling on it, as he is just happy to see that he got his hands on Aleutian's voice, even though he has got no clue where the heck he has ended up. And just when he is thinking about his whereabouts, a dwarf pops up unexpectedly, introducing himself as Hethos. The boy reciprocates with the dwarf's gesture and gives out his real name as well. Hethos then asks our hero if he is sure he can stomach food with his beat-up body, to which the boy kinda nods in agreement. So, the man orders this dwarf woman who is quite older despite her young appearance, and tells her to bring the food. Also, the lady in question is known as Dwarf Warrior Tilla de Steelhammer. When she happily presents the food before our hero, Rifen finds it a bit odd because dwarfs usually do not exactly roll out the welcome mat for humans. But his question gets answered as soon as the old dwarf they call Elder waddles into the scene. He is Alpoth Priest Gelfide Delphistone, and as soon as that old man calls our boy his savior, Rifenheart's face goes anxiously pale. Apparently, about 6 years ago, their big priest got a message from the god Alpoth. It was all about how some dude with muscles of steel and a brain to match would come floating down on ice water from a cave. They were told to save him and treat him like some sort of savior. The priest secretly told all the dwarves on the continent about this message, and since then, Gelfide's been waiting every winter for this savior to show up. Hearing all this, the boy starts to look kinda sheepish because he is already familiar with this god. You see, Alpoth is the big cheese god of dwarves, sometimes dropping divine messages on them. And 6 years ago is when our hero rolled into this era, which means Alpoth sent that message right after he arrived. Even though he has let the god down once before by messing everything up, he is feeling kinda grateful this time around for backing him up once again. In any case, Rifenheart turns to the old man and asks if he really did all of this just because they got that message, to which the dwarf simply responds that their god does not mess around. After chilling in this tunnel for a bit, we see the lady all smiles after seeing our hero totally healed. Once he drops the bowl right into her hand, he attributes his rapid recovery to her skills, to which the lady, dumbfoundedly, mentions that she actually has not done anything other than making barley porridge. After that little exchange, the lady cheerfully asks if she should bring Priest Gelfide back since he said he had something to talk about. The man just says he will find him himself. Also, in his head, the hero admits he would have healed a lot faster if she had given him some meat. Though good thing she did not. I do not know what kind of reaction she would have had after seeing him. Even though poor dude tried his best to dodge her, she ended up dragging him along just to help him walk around. This place is actually the Steel Hammer tribe, a bunch of mountain dwarves living as slaves in the Kelberin Viscounty. Unlike elves and orcs, they have stuck to their traditions and culture. The way they are used as slaves is different. Dwarves are the go-to for technical jobs because humans cannot match their skills. If you ask them how to find something, they will just tell you to follow the sound of Mother Earth. So, it is not exactly something any regular human can do. Plus, dwarves only really work when they are in their social groups, so they are sold as units. That is how they keep their culture and faith intact, and that is why priests like Gelfite are still around. Thanks to them, he got a ton of help from dwarves when building his empire, and they are the only ones among all the otherworldly races who truly get how societies work. While they are strolling, the boy casually asks the girl how many folks call this place home. She shrugs and mentions there are about 60, all under Viscount Kelberin's thumb as his slaves. Taking a gander around, he notices there are not any male in sight. To which, the girl simply explains they are usually off in the mines of the Setterlard Mountains. Reifenhart catches on quickly, sensing a sneaky move to keep the dwarves in check by holding their families hostage. Just as he is about to ask her something else, probably something important, the scene switches to the chamber of the elder priest. There, the little old guy is thanking our hero for showing up, all while addressing him as a savior. Hearing this, Reifenhart quickly brushes it off, and in return thanks the old man for their help, and insists he should be called Reifenhart instead. The little guy chuckles faintly, saying he does not really know why Reifenhart is their savior either, but he can tell that our hero does not see them as slaves. Reifenhart agrees, admitting he has a soft spot for dwarves and sees them as equals, but changing the fate of an entire species is a whole different ballgame. The old man nods, saying they do not know why Alpoth chose a non-dwarf as their savior. They just hold on to the hope given by their god and do their best because the oracle cannot be a lie. No one really knows how Reifen is supposed to save them. But for now, it is the dwarves' job to cooperate as best they can with their savior. The old man then points out how Reifen strangely did not react strongly when he was called the savior, almost like he already knew about it. Well, after getting caught red-handed, Reifenhart reluctantly agrees in a kind of roundabout way. Anyway, our hero gets to the main point, asking the little man what he wanted to talk about. In response, the old man mentions that the great priest, God Alpoth's high priest, who is known as Michelin, wants to see him. Looks like Reifen knows about this old guy, as he is the pillar of all dwarves. So he's pretty hyped to meet him once again. Seeing Reifen's enthusiastic face about meeting the priest also makes the old man intrigued. At first, he thought since Reifen is a human who cannot hear the sound of truth, he would just brush all this off as nothing but bogus talk, so he was worried from the get-go about how he would convince him. After hearing this, Reifen just gives him a sly grin without saying anything. He then recalls how in his past life he was the cause of all the destruction and why his empire failed. To avoid repeating the past, he figures consulting Michelin, who is a wise dwarf, would be a good idea. He also knows that Michelin is at the Grand Forge right now, which isn't too far actually. His last remaining doubts disappear when the old man says the same thing. He mentions that since Michelin is in the Great Temple of Alpoth in the Grand Forge, only a few dwarves know its location. Keeping that in mind, Tilla de Steelhammer steps up and offers to be his guide. Once again, the elderly elf is gobsmacked to realize that Reifen knew about the priest and even the location of the Grand Forge. He also claims he can hear our hero's thoughts, and even mentions how humans tend to avoid speaking to dwarves, just because they can avoid their minds being read, because dwarves can hear the sound of truth. After the elderly man reveals everything, Reifenhart also does not shy away before confessing everything that the old man said. Not surprisingly, the dwarf is shocked to hear this, and further asks if Reifen can spill more beans about what he knows about dwarves, but the boy brushes it off, saying it is not the right time yet. Suddenly, Hathos comes charging down, urgency written all over his face. As soon as he has everyone's attention, the dwarf blurts out the news to our hero that his companions, an elf and a young boy, are locked up in Viscount Kelberin's castle. Needless to say, the news hits Reifen like a thunderbolt out of the blue. Before we can see more of his reaction, the next scene abruptly takes us back to this Goldie bastard, who is barking orders to find our hero at any cost. This despicable, ruthless knight even goes as far as to say that it doesn't matter what kind of torture they use on those two, as long as they catch the thief. The soldiers respond with a quick yes sir before walking off to perform their assigned duty. The knight then glances over at his right shoulder where he catches the sight of our unusual duo, the elf wielding a seriously high-ranked weapon, and the priest packing enough divine power to rival his mom in terms of rankings. He is literally at a loss for words, unable to figure out who could be pulling the strings for these two, and it is only making him itch even more to track down our boy as soon as possible, to finally have some answers to these bizarre occurrences. Anyway, we catch those two soldiers again, looking real puzzled as they debate how to torture our duo. One suggests going all out and hitting them directly, but the other worries they will kick the bucket if they go too far. They brush off the concerns, figuring they gotta do what they gotta do since they were specifically ordered for this task. So, the guy with brown head, known as Lento, decides to step up first, and Blackhead, who goes by the name Barras, immediately agrees. 30 minutes tick by, and the two goons are left scratching their heads, after having heard all about our hero. Seems like Redhead is intentionally spilling everything about our hero that he hails from the infamous Jim Unbreakable, the martial clan of the indomitable Martial King, known as Gerard. He probably tries to spook these guys even more by talking up how brutal the training is at Gym Unbreakable. Like, regular folks could not even handle a fraction of what those disciples endure. Then he goes on about his last mission, snagging a relic that is probably now chilling in the Golden Knight's treasure room. These two knuckleheads look even more lost. They are wondering if a captive can yap this much without them even laying a finger on him. Anyhow, they toss him a glass of water once the chatterbox finally runs his throat dry. Once this chatterbox finally quenches his thirst, he is like a burst of sunshine. Meanwhile, the soldier is totally clueless about the saint's carefree character, which is making him curious if this guy is not scared of betraying his friend. He goes on about how if the world found out the martial king's successor committed a robbery, it would tarnish his reputation. But Redhead just shrugs it off, saying if that were true, he would not have done it in the first place. Well, it kinda makes sense to the soldier, but this still does not answer the question he is seeking, which makes him wonder why his friend did not even tell him where he was off to nab that relic. Redhead casually explains they were just ordered to stay put at the hotel. The soldier's still baffled, noting how his buddy went off alone without any way to contact him. With his usual nonchalance, the saint once again clarifies that his friend is an aura user, so it does not make any sense if he would lose in something as petty as robbery. After getting all the answers without any so much so effort, the soldier is literally boggled out of mind to think that if the interrogations are supposed to be that easy. The next scene takes us to the outskirts of the castle, where deep in the woods, we spot that familiar dwarf lady, probably on her way with our hero to rescue his friends. She is totally floored to see Rifen just caught an entire deer for themselves, and goes on to mention how a hunter would be green with envy at such skills. In response, the boy simply shrugs it off, saying it is expected when you are an aura user. Anyway, she reminds him that in Kelbrin territory, hunting is strictly forbidden. But Rifen brushes off the concern, saying he does not intend to sweat the small stuff anymore. Well, this might be a bit worrying for the lady, who has spent her whole life as a slave, but for our hero, there is no time to fuss over minor rules if he is gonna free all the otherworldly species. In any case, he digs into that juicy steaming hot meat, and once he starts chowing down, he is devouring it like a wild animal, leaving the lady behind totally gobsmacked. Then, her anxious expression turns into pure amazement when she notices our hero's body rapidly healing right before her eyes. Not only is he healed, but he has also regained all his strength, because with a single hand gesture, he unleashes a menacing aura that ripples through the area. Needless to say, the girl is once again bewildered by this sight. On the other hand, our hero just tears off those bandages, with his overflowing aura which is leaking out of his body. The scene transitions back to the castle, where we see the Goldie standing by the window, and his mind appears to be still occupied with Rifenhart's thoughts. He's convinced it couldn't have been a coincidence that our boy took that specific relic out of all the countless relics. To understand why he thinks that, let us rewind about a month. There, a man in robes strolls up to the Goldie, casually asking if he is Sir Eustace, the Golden Knight of the Grain Kingdom. Instead of giving a straight answer, Eustace shoots back by asking the robed guy who he is. That's when the mysterious figure flashes an emblem, saying the Goldie would definitely recognize it if he is the real deal successor of Count Teens. And sure enough, the Goldie does recognize the emblem, which is known as the Sage of Silver. He remembers the day he officially became the successor, and his father dropped a hint about the existence of the Sage of Silver. Apparently, they are a group of folks with insane power, capable of toppling entire nations. They are like super sages, with wisdom and knowledge that puts modern civilization to shame. These guys basically lurk in the shadows, only showing up when humanity's in a tight spot. Eustace was told that even a king's just middle rank among them. Heck, even a king cannot be considered top tier in the Sage of Silver's eyes. Once the Goldie recalls all this, he drops to his knees out of pure respect. That is when the sage hands him some kind of document, leaving the knight scratching his head. Of course, this sage tasks the teen's household with exploring the Aleutian ruins. Everything they find there will undoubtedly be theirs. However, there is one catch: the sage wants Aleutian's voice. To drive his point home, he puts on this menacing look in his eyes, and makes it clear that if they fail to acquire Aleutian's voice, the entire teen's family better brace themselves for a fall. And right in this current moment, he feels jittery just thinking about how he gonna tell all this to the Silver Sage. Suddenly, there is a knock on the door, and the two clueless soldiers saunter in. They inform their master that they have finished interrogating the two prisoners. While they believe the prisoners are telling the truth, the story seems almost too good to be true. As these two are busy recounting the saint's wild story to Eustace, the scene shifts outside. One of the soldiers standing guard feels chills running down his spine. Haunted by the memory of yesterday's events, he still cannot shake off the terror from our hero's devastating blow, which rendered them unconscious with a mere tap. Remembering how the hero fought the Golden Knight toe-to-toe, he hopes that the man never comes back again. The other guard, however, points out that the hero already stole what he came for. The first guard counters, explaining that Eustace still has his friends, and he has a gut feeling our hero might return to rescue them. Looks like they are in for another round of trouble, because just the sight of our hero sends shivers down their spines. And let me tell you, my man is not messing around. He is about to unleash chaos with his calamity horn. But before we can see him in action, the scene shifts back to the Golden Knight, who is shocked to hear that our hero belongs to Gym Unbreakable. Since the saint has told them that the relic belongs to Jim Unbreakable, he is confused as to why the Sage of Silver would want their possession. At first, he thinks the saint is lying, but considering his power level, he figures the saint might actually be telling the truth. Still, he entertains the idea that maybe the duo have just been abandoned by our hero. If that is the case, he is sure he will not run into Rifen again, so capturing him is not an option. Looks like Usus is stressing out for nothing, because the explosion that rocks the entire castle is definitely the work of our boy. Hearing that gigantic blast, Usus is totally losing his mind, trying to figure out who is behind it. When he finally catches the scent of that familiar energy, he is certain Rifen has arrived to shake things up. As chaos erupts throughout the area, the soldiers rally and charge forward, swords in hand, ready to take revenge for yesterday. Taking his stance, our hero makes it clear he is not holding back this time. But the knights aren't listening to anyone, and the platoon leader orders the soldiers to lunge at our hero, and they charge straight at him with sheer determination. Predictably, both of these poor guys get blasted away by the boy, who makes it crystal clear that shields are useless against his aura-packed punches. Then the priests themselves step in, boosting the power and agility of their soldiers. But despite their newfound buffs, Rifen dispatches them with mere taps of his shoulder and elbows. Seems like he has no time to deal with this annoyance, so he punches the ground beneath him, blowing up the entire area and sending nearby soldiers scattering like a bunch of ants. Even then, the priests just do not know when to quit. Both the icy priests and fire-wielding mages start bombarding Rifen with their ruthless magic power. Seeing them getting all riled up, Rifen prepares his fists and takes them out with just a single punch. Some find themselves losing limbs upon impact, while others are sent flying through the air with his fiery punches. Meanwhile, Rifen seems to be having the time of his life, beating the living daylights out of these people. Once he blows up the mages, he proceeds to take down the priests, after knocking them out as well. Amidst the chaos he is causing, all those soldiers and priests he is knocking down are dubbing Rifen nothing short of a monster. One particular guy, as he is getting choked out, begs our hero to spare his life. But my man's not listening to anyone. He is just relishing how these strong priests, whose divine spells actually get stronger when they are hurt, are falling before him. Eventually, he decides to knock everyone out with his calamity powers. The others in the vicinity are left terrified, witnessing all this doom and gloom unfold before their eyes. While all this is happening, Russ decides to saunter into the scene just like before, while the platoon commander is still losing his mind at the sight of him stepping forward. By now, the platoon leader is absolutely livid at this point, grinding his teeth as he watches this knucklehead not listening to him. With an enraged, stuttering voice, he makes it clear that he is going to disown Russ once they get back to the family. Well, it really does surprise me that he is the one raising this bastard boy of nobles. In any case, the guy is way too preoccupied with himself to give a damn about what this guy is saying, because his mind is utterly blown away by our hero, who is an aura user, and the dominance he is displaying. Watching Rifen control the flow of power and reinforce it when necessary is absolutely fascinating to him. He can clearly read his movements, understand why he is moving in a certain direction, and how his power flows. It is something no one has ever taught him, something no one has ever been able to teach him at all. Now that Russ has a clearer picture of how to move in such a situation, he is seeing the movements of someone genuinely strong. After seeing enough, Russ's sword starts to crackle with this blue aura, which is a clear sign that he has finally unlocked his aura powers. Then, out of the blue, that familiar golden energy comes crashing down toward Riefenhart. And seeing the Goldie finally show up puts a smirk on Rifen's face. By the looks of it, it is obvious that Goldie is not here for some chit-chat, so he cuts straight to the chase, saying he will not forgive our hero's actions in the name of teens, and he will not forget him for ruining the castle and beating his knights. Riefenhart does not hold back before calling out the wannabe cool Goldie knight for his lame speech. He reminds him that he has been aware of this Goldie lurking in the shadows, so there's no need for the dramatic entrance. To make things worse for Usus, Riefenhart points out how he was squatted behind a wall, far from any real action. With a sneer, he goes on to reveal how the knight was just gauging our boy's strength by using his subordinates essentially as dummies. He really gets under the knight's skin when he mentions that the legends about the Golden Knight being a kind and justice-loving hero seem to be just fairy tales. And at this point, the nearby soldiers start whispering among themselves, doubting Usus's character after the revelation. The knight loses it, totally denying everything. But my man just grins, asking why he did not step in earlier if he is telling the truth. Despite the knight's protests, our hero keeps dropping truth bombs, pushing the Goldie to his breaking point. With his sword raised, the knight starts to transform, surrounded by this flashy golden energy. Well, that just put a pleasant smile over our boy's face, who is ready to rumble, telling him to bring it on for a real fight this time. As the Goldie fully transforms into this chunk of golden iron, he starts chanting for his next move. Once he is done, he raises his sword and brings it crashing down, aiming to strike our eager hero, who seems to be thoroughly enjoying the sight of this renowned arcane blade in action, which is made of pure mana. Once they are about to clash, Riefenhart pulls out his trusty fist and immediately stops the blow. And so, the back and forth begins, just like in their previous fight. Despite giving it his all this time, our hero seems to be getting pushed back, realizing that his body is strong, but maybe not strong enough to stop an arcane blade. When the Goldie sees Reifenhart struggling against his blade, he raises his sword to draw faster. But before the strike lands, the hero quickly improvises a makeshift shield with his hands, saving himself from the direct blow. And so, the battle continues, with each fighter pushing themselves to their limits in this epic clash of power and skill. In the next scene, we are inside the castle, where our duo is just casually munching on some less than appetizing food. When they hear the commotion outside, the saint pipes up, suggesting that Reifenhart has probably swooped in to save them. Then, he starts teasing the girl, joking that she was acting all distant like she already knew our hero would come to their rescue. Naturally, Cirrus blushes at the comment, but she is genuinely puzzled about why he is being so kind and nice to her. But Cirrus is not so sure. Despite initially thinking the same, she cannot ignore all those warm gestures and the kindness she has seen in his eyes, which is just too complex to boil down to a simple crush. At first, he teases her once again, suggesting that their conversation hints at them falling in love with each other. But he adds a humorous twist, comparing it to how women might feel after marriage when they realize they have been deceived. It is something a nun at the orphanage once told him. Cirrus is absolutely baffled by this revelation, wondering what kind of past could lead a nun to impart such cynical wisdom to a young child. Suddenly, the redhead starts yapping again, lamenting how they have been stuck in a mess that rightfully does not belong to them. However, Cirrus notices that despite his whining, he does not seem to resent their predicament, to which the boy owns up, admitting that he kind of agreed to be an accomplice, so he shares some of the responsibility for not stopping him. Hearing this, Cirrus gives him a surprised look, as if she just realized he is not as much of a kid as she thought. But when Saint mentions that he is only in his 20s and Rifen is in his 22 woes, Cirrus literally jumps out of her skin in shock, because she had thought that this idiot might be more like 20 years younger than Rifen. Suddenly, we see the familiar dwarf girl sneakily peeking into the cell, checking if they are Rifen's friends. Once she confirms their identity, she cheerfully enters the room with the keys, introducing herself as Tilla. She mentions she is currently working with Reifenhart. Both of them are completely amazed to see a dwarf in person, but Tilla urges them to save their surprise for later, as they need to get out of there pronto. The redhead seems to be seeing a dwarf for the first time, and he is totally blown away that she looks just like a human except for her pointy, short ears. Seeing the idiot completely astonished, Cirrus calls him foolish for only noticing her ears as different, despite her calling him mature just a few seconds ago. As they hustle their way out, some soldiers catch sight of them, and Cirrus wastes no time in flooring one of the guards. When the other tries to retaliate, Tilla steps in, and after saving themselves from the attack, she grabs the man's weapon with her bare hands and swings him around like a rag doll, with this 60-kilogram guy still clinging to the weapon for dear life. And all the while, the saint can be seen with his jaw practically hitting the floor once again, right after witnessing her sheer strength. After she sends the guard crashing down, which obliterates the ground beneath them, the redhead's face turns sour, looking like he just bit into a lemon. Tilla then sheepishly mentions that dwarves are usually strong, and immediately takes off running, urging them to move quickly. After that, she tosses a bomb out of the window, which explodes mid-air. It is likely a signal for their hero friend that their rescue mission was a success. Once the Goldie turns around to see this flash of light, it does not take long for Eustace to realize it is coming from the direction of the underground prison. Rifen gets all fired up at the prospect of unleashing his full power, knowing there is nothing holding him back anymore. When the knight hears our hero's excitement, he is at a loss for words, realizing this guy was not even using his full strength until now. In a fit of frustration, he swings his sword at Rifen, who easily dodges it and retaliates with a powerful punch, sending the Golden Knight staggering backward from the sheer force. Feeling the pressure, the knight starts to feel somewhat hopeless, while Rifen keeps landing blow after blow like it is no big deal. Each punch is fueled by determination, but this time, the knight manages to dodge the attack, leaving our hero striking at empty ground. Seizing the opportunity, Eustace immediately swings his sword. But once again, Rifen dodges it effortlessly and delivers a devastating punch right to the man's chest in return. Despite delivering such a brutal blow, Reifenhart does not feel the impact of landing the punch. Upon closer inspection, the place where the attack landed disintegrates into a golden mist, and the knight leaps back, now covered in a menacing dark energy. With this second evolution, he appears even cockier than before, and in a blink, he creates multiple clones out of that black mist. Reifenhart initially thought he might not be as strong, but I guess he has been proven wrong. However, he does not seem to sweat anything since he already knows what kind of mage technique this man is using. The clones surrounding him raise their swords into the air, but before the Goldie guy could do anything, Rifen immediately spots the real one. With a cocky smirk, he lands yet another punch right to the belly, leaving Eustace drooling profusely, clueless as to how our hero saw through his trick. Well, you know it already, my man is a bit of a magician himself, so it is no surprise he is familiar with these petty magic tricks. Once again, the knight is ticked off, gearing up for another fiery attack. And as you can imagine, Rifen protects himself with a nifty spiral guard. After that fiery onslaught, the Goldie switches things up with a frosty attack, but even that is no match for our hero's Spiral Guard. Seems like Yusa still has wind attribute tricks up his sleeve, but even his wind attack is blocked by Spiral Guard. He is persistent and just does not give up, trying again and again, but Spiral Guard proves to be too strong for him. Our hero retaliates once more, blocking the Goldie's attacks effortlessly, and as he keeps blocking this persistent brat's attacks, Reifenhart looks totally annoyed out of his mind. But Reifen just keeps flexing his muscles with Spiral Guard, leaving the Goldie more infuriating than ever. So, you might be thinking Spiral Guard must be some ultra technique that nobody else uses. But the truth is, the reason other aura users cannot use it is not because it is difficult, it is because it is ridiculously simple. You see, other aura users can cover their bodies in aura to boost their defense, but they cannot circulate the aura in that state. Trying to do so would just tear their bodies apart. So, basically, only those from Gym Unbreakable have bodies that can handle this skill. As effective as it might sound, it takes a hefty toll on the amount of aura. Suddenly, the knight, feeling thoroughly humiliated, demands to know who is backing our hero from behind. To which, the boy meekly points to the platoon leader, indicating Goldie's own subordinate is the one behind his back. Of course, Eustace is beyond ticked off, and involuntarily starts exuding this orange aura as he is about to unleash his ultimate move with his sword. Looking like a terrifying being with his new look and enraged appearance, he raises his sword and requests its power to destroy all, known as the Light of Eldril. As this circus-worthy act takes place, our hero takes his stance, ramping up his own aura because he knows this is going to be tough to deal with. So, just as the bastard charges from the other side, Reifenhart also prepares to use his trump card, which is surely his trusty Calamity Horn technique. And almost instantly, he swings his blazing fist, while the cocky knight menacingly drops his sword to strike. Inevitably, the two forces clash with such strength that the heat generated can be felt from afar, disintegrating the ground around them. The sheer force of our hero's punch is devastating, shattering the knight's armor and likely breaking bones in the process. It is a sight that leaves the knight bewildered and struggling to comprehend the power behind such a skill. Despite being on the brink of defeat, the knight refuses to give up, pushing himself to keep fighting against our hero's relentless onslaught. But with each blow, his armor continues to crumble, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. As the battle rages on, the knight finally realizes the secret behind our hero's devastating attacks. It is not just brute force, but a layered aura that creates explosive impacts equal to boulders crashing into water, causing whirlpools of destruction that tear through armor and flesh alike. Even after realizing the true nature of Reifen's attacks, the persistently cocky knight decides not to give up. He is convinced this will be the last explosion our hero has in him. As this last explosion intensifies, obliterating everything in its path, the knight clings stubbornly to our boy's fist. But eventually, he is sent staggering backward, crashing into a nearby wall. And this final explosion marks our hero's victory, leaving the sword of Eustace falls to the ground as the knight loses his grasp on it. On the other hand, Reifen stands tall before his defeated enemy, still in his stance. Meanwhile, the platoon commander and the other knights are absolutely terrified, chills running down their spines as they witness the fall of Sir Eustace. As Reifen walks toward the sword, he pulls it from the ground. The other knights start shouting, accusing him of trying to steal Eldrin. But to their surprise, our boy just hands the sword back to the platoon commander, apologizing for the mess he caused in pursuit of an artifact he wanted dearly. The knight, holding the sword, is shocked to see that Reifen is not driven by pure greed. Little does he know, Reifen would have stolen that sword and given it to Cirrus if he did not already plan to give her the divine light sword known as Messiah. Just as Reifen is about to leave, a familiar voice calls out from behind, challenging him with a blade. Of course, it is Russ, always itching to fight anyone he sees as formidable. He makes it clear that the battle is not over yet since Reifen has not defeated the teen swordsman yet. Not surprisingly, the commander starts shouting at Russ as usual, while Reifen clearly remembers encountering this guy before. And just like before, the old coot threatens the boy with the same old trick of telling him he will disown him. Still, Russ rushes forward toward our hero, and seeing him charge like this, it does not take Reifen long to realize that this dude only knows how to strike down with a sword, so he decides to go easy on him. Surprisingly, Russ's sword starts to weave around in the air like a slippery eel after gaining enough momentum. He strikes, and although Reifen steps back, Russ's blow hits empty air with such force that it obliterates the ground around him. To Reifen's dismay, he still ends up with a cut after all, leaving him dumbfounded as to how he got cut despite his body's usual endurance against blade attacks. When Reifenhart glances back at Russ, he sees him unleashing some serious blade aura. He is just plain shocked to see that familiar blue aura, which reminds him of one guy, who is one of the heroes who faced him in his past life, who goes by the name of Sword Saint Cyrus. When our hero blurts out that name unintentionally, the bluehead is utterly bewildered to hear him drop his real name. You see, this guy's full name is Cyrus Votians, which he got when he was knighted. But because nobody really acknowledged him as a knight, everyone just stuck with the name his humble mom gave him at birth. It seems Reifen is really kicking himself for not recognizing this guy earlier, especially since they are both from teens. Anyway, he further reveals to us that nowadays, the teens' household is all about the Golden Knight. But fast forward 30 years for this dude, it is a whole different ballgame. With the Sword Saint rose to fame, Teen's family had also risen to marquee status. They have even managed to shake off the whole stigma of using magical gear as swordsmen. And that is why it did not click right away for our hero, because back in his original time, the Golden Knight was ancient history. Just when Cyrus the Saint's sword is feeling embarrassed for being recognized by his real name, our boy smooths things over, casually brushing it off like he mistook him for someone else. Hearing this, Bluehead is not just embarrassed, he is also kinda let down. Seeing him wear his heart on his sleeve like this reminds Ryfin that people can actually change, given that this guy was all grumpy and arrogant in his previous life. But Russ is not ready to call it quits just yet. He resumes the fighting, charging at our hero with his sword swinging. This time Ryfin does not hold back either, and inevitably, their clash sends shockwaves through the ground, reducing it to rubble. Yet, even this is not enough to bring our hero down, and simply retaliates with a menacing swing, delivering a devastating blow straight to Cyrus's chest. Despite the blow he received, Bluehead refuses to give in. He amplifies his blue aura even further, leaving our boy surprised to see him using it to counter the impact of his punch. Unable to contain his admiration, Ryfin compliments Cyrus for his impressive control over the aura, especially considering he has only recently awakened it. However, instead of basking in the compliment, Bluehead just dives back into the action, swinging his sword like crazy psycho at Unleash. Despite dodging them for a while, Ryfinheart is shocked to realize that he can't predict Cyrus's attacks at all. Basically, all of Russ's attacks are coming from the most unexpected directions, making his movements nearly impossible for our hero to predict. Normally, combat techniques follow established theories created by countless people. Even our hero's master, Gerard, passed down the gym's unbreakable system using these theories. But Russ fights like a wild beast, and there are no formalities or patterns to his movements. You would think that fighting someone so unorthodox would be easier, but Russ moves with such precision and strength that our hero can't find any openings to retaliate, even though Russ wields his sword however he wants. Now it finally makes sense to our hero why this guy is hailed as the Great Sword Saint, someone humanity sees only once every 100 years. Reflecting on past lives, our hero clearly remembers that Russ was the one who wiped out his friends and subordinates while they were trying to escape. Not gonna lie, back then I didn't take this guy seriously, since he looked more like a sex offender than a powerful hero, especially with his thick beard and short physique. Anyway, once his buddy Tathid's memories come rushing back, who was killed by Cyrus, our hero suddenly taps into this hidden strength and totally catches Russ off guard by shattering his blade with just one hit, thanks to his blazing aura. When we take a look back, Ryfin looks seriously pissed off, his blazing aura more intense than ever. Even then, the swordsman of Teens refuses to give up. He gears up for a big downstroke move, which he has apparently been training for his whole fucking life. Not only him, our Ryfin is also ready to smash through anything in his way, especially since he knows this guy is destined to become his archenemy again. With that in mind, he lands a devastating punch right to Russ's belly, and with those vengeful eyes, he obliterates everything with his aura, sending Russ flying backward, just so he can avoid the fate he had encountered in his previous life. Once our hero's fiery rage starts to simmer down a bit, what he sees totally catches him off guard. Despite being turned into a bloody mess, his opponent is somehow still alive, and, unsurprisingly, he repeats once again that he is a Sword of Teens. Now, the resolve and determination Russ is showing is really starting to chip away at Ryfin's conviction. He can feel it in himself that he is not being driven to kill this boy, even though he had every intention and enough power to do so. As he looks at Russ again, doubt starts to creep in. Should he really take him down? Despite knowing that Russ poses a threat to him and his friends in the future, he cannot shake the feeling that Tathid, his orc friend with the soul of a great warrior, might be resisting the urge to kill Russ himself. Maybe he is upset that our hero took away his chance for revenge. So, in this moment of reflection, our hero decides to give Russ a pass to live and shifts his focus to setting up a fair duel for his buddy. Naturally, the swordsman of Teens is completely thrown to hear this unexpected declaration. Before leaving, Ryfin shoots him a menacing glare one last time, basically telling him to live on and grow stronger for the sake of his friend Tathid. The reason he wants Russ to train is because, back in the day, Tathid and the Sword Saint Cyrus went head-to-head multiple times, and every clash made both of them stronger, and it was like this healthy rivalry that pushed them to their limits. And if Ryfin takes down Cyrus now, Tathid might miss out on the chance to become the greatest orc warrior once again. With that in mind, our hero starts to walk out from the place, leaving the task of dealing with Russ to his friend. Seeing our hero walk away silently definitely leaves Russ wide-eyed and shattered inside. He probably feels inadequate, and in a fit of rage, he furiously smashes the ground with his sword, sending shockwaves through the area. The boy just cries his eyes out, likely feeling abandoned and at the mercy of someone else. In any case, we are back in the snowy mountains, where the dwarf lady is delighted to see our hero return. Ryfin also seems thrilled to see his friends back once again. On the other hand, the saint just mumbles in his grumpy tone, thanking our hero for putting them through this wild ride. Although he admits that this kind of stuff is expected when someone travels as a pilgrimage, he never expected himself to get imprisoned. I guess the saint has a point, and our hero actually apologizes for it as well. Even after receiving a heartfelt apology, the saint tries to poke at our hero's nerves by mentioning how things might have turned out worse for him, given that Sirius is a girl but also an elf. As you can imagine, Ryfin jumps out of his skin in sheer shock, and once he leans closer, he asks Sirius if something bad happened to her, to which she blushingly reassures him with a positive response. Meanwhile, the saint grins with his sly smirk, having expected to see this lovey-dovey couple interact like that. Anyway, the boy vows to be more careful next time to not cause trouble, while the elf lady asks if he got what he was looking for, to which the boy responds with a yes. He then presents his bounty, which leaves the saint totally astounded to see it. Curiously, he asks what this thing is used for since it does not look like something related to martial arts. The boy blatantly lies, stating that he does not know either since the master only told him to bring the relic back. As they hit the road for their next destination, the scene shifts back to the castle, where soldiers are busy sweeping up the mess our hero left behind. While they work, the soldiers chat amongst themselves, sharing the news that Russ has awakened his own aura, becoming the first aura user in the Teen's Night Order. As whispers spread, Goldie feels frustrated to hear that his bastard brother has gained such powers. He cannot wrap his head around how a guy like Russ, who came out of the womb of a dirty commoner, could pull it off. You see, the main cause for his concern is that because finally, there is an aura user in the teen's household. His father, who has always been best buddies with Russ, and the elder, who praised Goldie up front but wished for an aura user behind his back, are main factors. Having an aura user in the family could boost their status big time, which will potentially sideline the Goldie in the process. Feeling like nothing more than a loser without his legendary armor, Goldie starts to feel inadequate. But he still clings to the belief that he is the sword of teens, or at least that is what he tells himself. Anyway, the scene shifts back to his bastard brother, who is standing on the edge of the hill, looking proud after awakening his aura, which will potentially change everything around him. Just as he is basking in the moment of catching up to his brother in terms of power, Goldie shows up, remarking how Russ seems rather happy today. Turning around at the sound of his bro's voice, the boy is startled to see Eustace gracing the scene. After reaching his bastard brother, Eustace mentions hearing about his young sibling awakening his aura, and expresses his eagerness to see it for himself. Proud as can be, the little brother wastes no time showing off his newfound powers to his sibling. Upon seeing Russ's powers, Goldie compliments him with a smile of pure admiration, leaving the boy more than happy, thinking his brother has finally acknowledged him. Or at least that is what he thought until this deceitful cocky bastard severed the boy's chest with his sword. Even as Russ is pierced, he just could not understand why his brother would do such a thing. On the other hand, Goldie shows no ounce of shame or sympathy on his face for his little brother. Even after getting a direct hit to his chest, Russ still cannot wrap his head around why his brother would pull a move like that. Meanwhile, his ruthless brother keeps jabbering while shoving the sword deeper into Russ's chest, going on about how he would never hand over his title of teen swordsman to some lowly, filthy swine who crawled out of a commoner's womb. After hearing his brother's trash talk, Russ is pretty fucking sure his brother is out to get him. Realizing this, the boy fights back, and a giant explosion takes place. While the blondie still holds his ground, trying his best to shove Russ off the cliff, the boy is also giving it his all to shake off this golden McShine. It looks like folks are starting to show up after hearing the commotion, and the blondie is not thrilled about it. But oddly enough, Russ seems to deliberately let himself fall from the cliff, maybe to save his brother's dignity. And it seems like Goldie's feeling a twinge of regret as he watches his brother tumble down. This is probably the darkest turn Goldie has ever faced. Seeing his brother, he cannot help but think of those old legends where the betrayed ones fall into a river and survive, only to come back later for revenge. To cover his own backside, Goldie decides to take some extra precautions before things escalate. Once the other cavalry arrives at the scene, the dude falls to his knees and starts blabbering about how Russ tried to ambush him to snatch the patriarch position. Naturally, the knights buy into this guy's story, their faces going as white as sheets. They mutter about how they saw this coming from a mile away, and the dirty bloodline behaved exactly as expected. Then, the commander demands to know where the hell Russ disappeared to. Eustace spins another yarn, saying he tried to defend himself and accidentally Russ ended up tumbling off the cliff into the river. He also adds that the boy is injured in the abdomen, so there is a chance he might not make it. Would you believe it? The jerk is grinning from ear to ear after making fools out of those knights. The way he spun that tale, even if Russ pulls through, he's no threat to Goldie. And Blondie is dead certain that even if Russ is some aura user, he will not be able to match his sword's power. The knights start scrambling to search for Russ, leaving that sneaky jerk still smirking on the ground. I wish I had a way to sock him right in the kisser, right where it hurts the most. The scene shifts back to the mountains, where we finally see our crew trudging along the path. My buddy, probably trying to show off his muscles, is strolling along naked even though it is colder than your mother's sense of humor. As we walk, Sirius asks Ryfin how he met Tilla, to which the boy mentions that the dwarves saved him from drowning in the river. Naturally, the elf is completely shocked to hear that dwarves saved humans. To elevate her confusion, the boy explains that there was an oracle prophecy saying that our hero would be the one to save the dwarves. While Cirrus is struggling to believe that, Tilla enthusiastically backs Ryfan's statement, pointing out that he's actually supposed to be their savior. The saint is confused to learn that dwarves believe in gods. I guess it is understandable for the redhead to not know something common like this, since humans always saw dwarves as a species made for slavery, and it never crossed their minds that they might have their own religions and culture. Anyway, Ryfan sets the record straight that dwarves believe in Alpoth and they have got their own priest too. Hearing this, the curious saint throws out another question, asking if Alpoth was really supposed to be some evil god. It looks like even Ryfan does not know the reason as to why this god is called evil, so he asks what did Alpoth do to earn that title. Well, apparently, among the 12 gods, 2 are not as well known, Eldia, the goddess of the elves, and Alpoth, the god of dwarves. Alpoth is known as an evil god, but I am sure even Saint does not know why he's called that. Suddenly, Cirrus spots something down in the river and she is pretty sure it is a person. And I am pretty darn sure it is Russ. In any case, our party hauls him out of the river and the priest patches up his deadly wound while Ryfan's busy trying to figure out how the heck this guy ended up here and why he got stabbed like that. Seeing the boy lost in thought, the saint asks if he knows Russ, to which the boy kinda agrees in a roundabout way. Though he has no clue if Russ was destined to meet him here, or maybe there is a sequel to the oracle he missed out on. The scene shifts to the cart rolling down the path, while Russ is resting inside, finally coming back to the land of the living. He immediately sits up in confusion, wondering how he ended up in the carriage. His mind then jumps to that incident with his brother. There, he spills how he always looked up to Eustace and never had the guts to resent him. Russ tried his hardest to be on par with his brother, just so he could earn some recognition. But it looks like Russ was way off the mark about that. While he's chewing over his own foolishness, Ryfan pops up out of nowhere, asking if he's awake and how he's feeling. Ryfan also spills that they found him floating down the river, half dead, and ended up saving his butt, which is how he landed here. Russ then asks where they are, to which Ryfan explains they are chilling in Vade Barony, and it has been 3 days since the Kelburn Castle incident. They also let him know that his injury was serious stuff, something any less skilled person would not have been able to fix. But since Russ is an aura user, the saint patched him up just fine. Once Russ hears about his injury, his mind immediately drifts back to his brother, which is something he would not rather wish to remember. Ryfan catches Russ off guard, reminding him how they pulled his sorry hide back from the brink of death, and since Russ cannot muster up a good old thank you, he figures the least he can do is be a bit civil to everyone around here. So the poor sword saint starts nodding his head like a bobblehead, thanking Ryfan for saving his life. But then Ryfan throws him a curveball, pointing out it was not him who footed the bill for the carriage ride, and it was the saint. Ryfan then asks Russ if he wants some money to get back to his place. The reason behind our hero offering the money is that he wants the future sword saint to owe him a favor. So, at least, even if they end up becoming enemies in the future, Russ would not have the guts to go against someone who saved his life. Well, it looks like the boy is feeling a bit reluctant about going back home. Once the night settles in the mountains, Russ spills his whole ordeal about how he might now be framed as a traitor who ambushed the successor. So, there is no point in going back home. Looks like Ryfan is blaming himself with some serious guilt over Russ's tough luck. In his past life, Russ would have tapped into his aura, squared off with his brother in a legit duel for that successor title, and that is how Ryfan first heard of Eustace. And now that Ryfan has changed the future, he has no clue what he should be doing. Russ is also on the same boat, not knowing what should be his next move, as he will only be treated as a traitor even if he went back to Teens County. After a little bit of thinking, Russ announces that he will come with our party on their journey, only if they have space for one more person. Of course, this unexpected development catches Ryfan off guard, leaving him choking over his food. Not only him, but the entire crew is absolutely bewildered to hear this. Looks like our hero's plan to make Russ indebted to him backfired, as Russ now feels obliged to tag along with them to repay for the kindness they have shown so far. Russ really throws Ryfanhart for a loop by pointing out that Ryfan was the one who helped him unlock his aura, and Russ wants to dive deeper into the whole aura business, and figures there is no one better than our hero, who is a successor of Marshal King Gerard. Apparently, in Ryfanhart's past life, the Sword Saint was supposed to go on a journey to find the strongest aura users in the nation to beef up, but now that he's a supposed traitor, he has nowhere to go. That leaves Russ with no other option but to turn to Ryfanhart, since he's pretty much the only aura user around that Russ can count on. But hold on to your hats, because the surprises keep coming. My guy's soul's practically doing the limbo out of his body when Sword Saint Cyrus pledges his loyalty to Ryfanhart, swearing to stick by his side until he feels he's strong enough. I guess having an enemy as a friend is not the worst idea, and it would be cool if he could also convince the other heroes to join his side. But right now, Hero Alex and Saintess Ellen are not even born yet, and Teslan is out of the picture, which leaves only the Mage of Light, known as Jade. But since Jade was the one who killed his precious Cirrus in his past life, Ryfan would not even want to give him a handshake, let alone make him his sidekick. Even if Jade begged personally to join his party, Ryfan would still say no way. Anyway, with a big grin, he tells Bluehead that he does not have to swear his loyalty. If he wants, he's free to tag along on their adventures. Of course, the Sword Saint is thrilled to finally be under our hero's wing. And instantly, he starts addressing Ryfen as his big brother, and that is how they spend their midnight. Just chatting away. Back in Teens County, we catch Blondie on his knees, groveling before the Silver Mage for botching up the relic mission he was assigned. But the mage is not really convinced with those half-hearted apologies. He wants answers, so he asks Eustace what made him fail the mission and what was so hard for him to conquer. Or perhaps the Silver Mage just overestimated this shallow knight's abilities. Despite all the sass, Blondie's got no choice but to swallow his pride and beg for forgiveness. Because let us face it, when you are staring down the barrel of power like the Silver Mage, resistance is futile. I mean, the guy can conjure up illusions of himself, which is some kind of next-level wizardry. Even the top dogs among mages cannot pull off a stunt like that. So Blondie eats humble pie, dropping to his knees and confessing up to his screw-up. He is not only disappointing this dude in the robe, but he's letting down the teen's family's future, and that is a whole new level of pressure. After cutting off that Skype transmission, the mage's just plain disappointed in himself. He is kicking himself for putting trust in this half-baked mage swordsman. And now it is crystal clear why the Golden Knight got shoved into the shadows by the Sword Saint. This guy's got some insider info about the future, no doubt about it. Otherwise, why would he be talking like he's got a crystal ball? Here's hoping we will soon find out what his deal is and how he's tied into our hero's story so far. Suddenly, the mage gets summoned by Duke Aranad, the 7th most powerful aura user in the Graham Kingdoms. Well, that is not a summons you ignore. So, once he's face to face with the Duke, the big man wastes no time in asking what made the mage so desperate that he went as far as to use the divine symbol. And by the way, this divine symbol is probably the emblem which the mage used to pursue the Blondie to do his work, which is probably why the Duke is upset. The Duke showers the mage with praise, commending him for awakening his aura at the young age of 20. He goes on to applaud the mage's impressive ability to predict the future, which has proven invaluable for the Duke and is projected to continue safeguarding humanity in the years ahead. The Duke reveals that the mage was recommended as the Sage of Silver not solely based on his current accomplishments, but because of his immense potential for the future. Humbled by the Duke's words, the mage offers a simple apology for any disappointment he may have caused. The Duke reassures him that there will not be any disciplinary actions taken, as his use of the divine symbol did not lead to any major repercussions. However, the Duke advises him to be mindful of his role as the Sage of Silver. With those words, the Duke gives the sage, Leston, the green light to depart. But just as Leston turns to leave, the Duke surprises us by addressing him by his real name, Tesslon. And would you believe it, looks like Tesslon's true identity has been uncovered at last. And about this whole Sage of Silver thing, apparently, they are like the secret guardians of humankind, pulling the strings from the shadows. Their power is so massive, they can make or break entire nations. But Tesslon is still a small fry in this big pond. He has barely made the cut to be a member, let alone climb the ranks, and he has got a mountain to climb if he wants to reach the top. And the reason that he is getting desperate is that he's convinced the Demon King, the nightmare that shook the world with terror in his previous life, has been reincarnated into this world. But this time, it is not just any old reincarnation, because this so-called Demon King, who is our boy of course, has a body of steel and the brain of a master mage. He cannot even imagine what kind of nightmare he will bring. So Tesslon wants to stop him at all costs, and he's feeling pretty down that our boy managed to take Lucian's voice. Even then, Tesslon is clinging to the hope that it should not be a cakewalk for our boy to regain all his powers. So, he wants to get stronger faster than Ryfen just to beat our hero to the punch. You see, Lucian's voice is one of the 4 symbol relics, and according to Jade, those artifacts are the reason the Demon King was able to become so powerful. So, Tesslon intends to make sure he grabs the 4 symbol relics before our hero does. Back with our party, the Saint sitting among the ladies looking pretty annoyed, probably because he's stuck driving the carriage solo. Even the Sword Saint finds their way of doing things pretty odd, which is totally hard for him to fathom. Apparently, last night they divided up chores by drawing names, when they could have just roped the elf into doing all the grunt work. But no, Ryfen ended up with the cleaning duty, leaving Russ totally confused. So he directly asks Ryfen why he is doing this stuff when he's got slaves to handle it. As you might have guessed already, our hero's got a heart of gold, and he refuses to treat other species like slaves, only sees them as precious friends instead. And he's dead set on keeping it that way. Ryfen even goes as far as to tell the Sword Saint that he does not have to relate to him or think the same way as he does. Although this whole thing does not make any sense to Bluehead, he does not seem to have a choice in the matter. After all, he's already sworn his loyalty to our hero. So, until his days of apprenticeship come to an end, Russ decides to just do what he's ordered to do. While everyone else is outside the carriage, Russ is also confused about why Ryfen is stuck inside. And when we take a peek inside ourselves, we see him doing some funky stuff with his relic. He then starts rubbing that relic, activating the cube, and it begins to transform. He instructs the cube for the first level challenge for beginners, and in the next moment, we find ourselves inside that cube. Looks like this cube is some sort of simulated reality where Rifen is probably here to train himself. Seeing those mundane surroundings, he starts going through the simulation settings and puts on a theme of a swimming party with those hot ladies with their sexy voluptuous figures gracing the scene. After surrounding himself with those fake ladies, this degenerate grins from ear to ear for having a life of luxury. Suddenly, a notification arrives, welcoming our hero into Magical Beat. And after that flash of notification, those colorful slabs start to descend from above, and the boy starts firing wind bullets. Each slab gives him 1 experience point. The next time, he uses flames to aggregate fire arrows, and as he progresses further, the number of those slabs also increases, and the speed of their descent also ramps up. Still, he keeps up with his struggles, while those fake ladies on the sidelines take on the role of cheerleaders to boost his spirit. But man, their choice of words is pretty crude, leaving him wondering if he's supposed to feel good about it. Anyway, he ends up missing 3 of the slabs, which knocks off 2 points for each slab. After a lot of struggle, he finally manages to nail the beginner's stage, and this time, the ladies are actually giving him some positive praise for his efforts. After he steps out of the cube, we get to know more about this thing. Apparently, this artifact called Illusion's Voice was used for education back in the Silver Ages. It lets you pick different settings like casinos, schools, or parks, all filled with music and pretty women cheering you on. And every time you pass a stage, you rack up points. It is like motivation and training wrapped up in one neat package. Seems like those Silver Age folks really were not big fans of hitting the books if they had to resort to making a relic like that. He is itching to know why there is only one relic currently in existence. But hey, at least he's stoked that it will help him beef up his magic stash, even if he is using Teslon's brain. Suddenly, he hears a shout from outside. As he peeks out curiously, the saint enthusiastically points his finger in the forward direction. Looks like they have finally rolled into a place called Strassend after what feels like forever on the road. Strassend is apparently a bustling hub, where all sorts of trade routes converge, military deals go down, and business flourish everywhere. Once they get into the city, Riefenhart wastes no time before heading straight to the Mage Tower, where he requests information about the true Riefenhart. As he delves into his physical history in the records, he reads that he lost his mind at the age of 16 and went wild due to some unidentified mental illness. Also, he insisted that he was Teslon instead of Riefenhart. This revelation pretty much shatters any lingering doubts Riefenhart had, and it is now crystal clear to him that the Martial King has undoubtedly been reincarnated into this time period. At last, this is the moment we've all been waiting for since the first episode. Now the real crust of the plot has been revealed to us, and a Pandora box of various possibilities has been opened. I simply can't wait to see how our hero and Teslon would clash in this timeline, and whether there might be a chance for them to become friendly with each other. I'm sure you guys are just as excited, and are looking forward to the future episodes to see how the plot will progress. So as usual, stay tuned, stay subscribed, and keep your notifications on for the upcoming episodes. Until next time.